When I think about all the disappointing entries in my favourite game franchises like Halo 4, Soul Calibur 5, Metal Gear Solid 5, nothing really compares to Mortal Kombat 2011. It's been 5 years since this game saw release and it still hurts. It really is no exaggeration to say that once was a time when Mortal Kombat was my favourite series in any medium. Now, I first reviewed this game back in 2012, so I'm sure the most prevalent question about this whole thing is, why? Why review a game I already spent 2 hours lambasting 4 years ago? Well, I want to approach it differently this time, focus on more important stuff and cut down on some of the nitpicks. I've got a bunch of new things to discuss and hopefully I can more clearly and concisely convey my opinion on certain topics. Once again, because this is the internet, it needs stressing that I am not criticising people who like the game. If you do, that is fine. But that being said, getting upset about my opinion is a totally legitimate response because, obviously, I chose to hate a game in my favourite franchise, you fucking idiots! I first discovered the series when I was about 7 or 8, and my dad bought me MK4 for the PC. I liked it well enough, but it wasn't until I tried Mortal Kombat Deadly Alliance around 2002-2003 that I really fell in love with the series. To me, that's when the series mechanics actually became fun and deep, instead of the shallow, simplistic gameplay of the previous titles. After that, I was hooked. I check fan sites daily for any new information about upcoming releases, from Deception to Shaolin Monks to Armageddon to DCU, and to this day, Mortal Kombat Deception is easily in my top 3 favourite fighting games of all time. But then MK 2011 happened. See, by the mid-aughts, the series had 61 playable characters, each with years of backstory to keep up with, and unfortunately, most of the characters introduced after the jump to 3D weren't all that popular among fans. And so, 2006's Mortal Kombat Armageddon was conceived. The team at Midway said, screw it, let's bring everyone back for one last bash and have most of them die off for good. Just wipe the slate clean and do a Tekken 3 style time skip and start fresh with the new cast of warriors with some old favourites sticking around. All told, the game had 62 playable characters plus a custom character slot and female chameleon in the Wii port. The endings weren't very conclusive, but the stage was set for a great continuation. 2008 saw the release of the next entry, Mortal Kombat vs DC Universe, an entry that received a somewhat lukewarm reception, but may have proved integral in how the series moved forward. See, just 3 months after DCU release, Midway Games filed for bankruptcy. Most of their franchises unfortunately faded into obscurity, but Mortal Kombat was purchased by DC's parent company, Warner Bros. I believe that MK vs DCU is what put the series in WB's line of sight until the bankruptcy and led to it being purchased. I don't doubt that the series would have been bought by someone regardless, but I feel that the series going to WB may have impacted how the series was developed from then on. Under WB Games, most of the MK team were brought on to form NetherRealm Studios, primarily to produce MK games but also other similar fighting games like Injustice Gods Among Us and WWE Immortals. But enough of the history lesson. What is Mortal Kombat 2011? MK9, as it's often known because DCU is considered the main title, is properly called Mortal Kombat. Just Mortal Kombat. Because that's not confusing or stupid at all. I mean, I do get it, the game was a brand new beginning for the franchise after all. In addition to overhauling graphics, gameplay and violence, the game also overhauled the story in an attempt to make it easy to follow. How did they accomplish this? They created a fully fleshed out story mode to more clearly convey the game's narrative, which itself was a key part of this fresh start by being a reboot. But not the traditional start over with a new continuity style of reboot, oh no. This is an in-continuity reboot. Basically, the reboot is brought about by events within the story itself. The 2009 Star Trek film is a good example of this. So I have to wonder if this was Warner Bros. Idea, since DC has a long-standing history of doing this exact thing. As a result of all this, the game's roster consists of the entire cast of the original 3 games, except Motaro, who the team find too hard to animate in 3D, and Rain, whose absence is unjustified and likely just to make room for the ruiner of everything himself, Quan Chi, a character who has no place in MK1 to 3 but is here anyway. The PlayStation versions also feature Kratos from the God of War series, a character for whom my contempt is eclipsed only by his near identical cousin, although as far as guest characters go he's probably the best fit for MK. Naturally, one of the conditions for his inclusion was that he can never do anything goofy or show fear in the face of a fatality because he's special. Supposedly Sweet Tooth and Twisted Metal was also considered before they settled on Kratos. Xbox and PC versions received nothing to make up for this, which is the worst way to do guest characters. In addition to costumes, post-release DLC features 4 more characters, each of whom represented a particular theme in my eyes. A new character, Scarlet, a 3D era character, Kenshi, a 2D era character, Rain, and a guest character, Freddy friggin' Krueger. Sadly, there was no extra story content surrounding these 4, not even adding them into the background of cutscenes like Scarlet already is. Just imagine a bonus chapter where Kenshi fights Rain, Scarlet and Ermac during or after the event of the story. In fact, if you pay attention at the end of chapter 8, Shang Tsung calls on Kenshi and Reiko for the next tournament fight, so there was room there for more story, but they didn't do anything with it. Visually, the game looks great, although the cutscenes are pre-rendered and noticeably compressed, which somewhat diminishes how good the visuals are. But there's tons of little details in the background, and some of the costumes are the best the characters have ever had. I mean, just look at Scorpion here. Blood and other effects stick to the characters, and they receive cuts, bruises and torn clothing as they take damage is great, even if it is a little bit excessive. The voice cast is great, there aren't any bad performances, and whether they returned from DCU or took on the role for the first time, everyone did at least a good job. Some of them even managed to pull out a surprising range of voices. I feel like particular praise needs to go to Patrick Seitz, Karen Strassman, Richard Epcar, Matthew Mercer and Jeff Pilson. The former 3 do a fantastic job in spite of the bad elements of their respective character stories, and definite credit to the latter 2 for their contributions to their characters. Most especially Strassman and Epcar. Epcar perfectly captures the burden of not only what Raiden must prevent, but also what happens as a result of his actions. Strassman, meanwhile, actually managed to make me care about Kitana's story for the first time ever. She got the opportunity to portray a variety of emotions and then got to have some fun as Melina. But to get back on point, surely streamlining the story to make it less convoluted is a good thing, right? Maybe, maybe not. We'll see in a little while. For now though, I think it's best to start with the gameplay, since that is the most important part of the game, how the game actually plays. You can forgive a lot with weak or even bad stories if the gameplay is good enough. But it's not. For some reason that completely eludes me, a lot of fans seem to really dislike the gameplay from the PS2 era games, but I thought it was the best the series has ever had. And yes, there was of course a commenter on the original review who tried to discredit my entire critique because they preferred one style and I prefer another. It's like trying to discredit someone for liking Sonic Adventure more than Sonic 2. Completely moronic.
You retarded little retards! Retards!
In the PS2 entries, the combos were much smoother and flowed much more satisfyingly than any other entry before or since. Each character had multiple movesets to make use of to help distinguish the characters further beyond special moves. They experimented with new mechanics like death traps and stage hazards, and the 3D movement meant the player couldn't just spam projectiles or teleports because sidestepping made avoiding those kinds of attacks trivial, requiring the player to properly plan and strategize their use of such attacks. Sure, styles being swapped around between games took away some of the identity of the characters using them, but it was still a lot better than everyone having the same generic 3-hit combos for 4 games. MK 2011 takes the series back to a 2D perspective, as far as I can tell, just because that's how the series used to be, and those are the games people remembered most fondly. But this is a dangerous thought process because it leads to going back on innovation, like how people want RE2 make to have fixed camera angles again. The series had improved, moved on, but we took a step back into a more archaic system. Normal attacks are no longer based on high, medium, low, punch and kick, but rather a button mapped to each limb like in Tekken. Combos are now short, slow, and incredibly awkward looking with a complete lack of impact. As a result of the attacks being so unsatisfying to use, special attacks become emphasised because it's the only cathartic impact regular gameplay has to offer. Speaking of catharsis, fatalities return in their traditional form after Armageddon's Builder Fatality,
Fatality.
and DCU's toned down fatalities and heroic brutalities. The finishes here are the most violent they've ever been, some to the point of being totally meaningless. I get that, like many others, Johnny Cage combines both of his MK2 finishes into one, but why bother when just the decapitation is enough and the rest is completely pointless? Don't get me wrong though, most of these are really damn good. The level of detail in the gore is astounding and some of them are really damn creative. But there is such a thing as taking a good thing too far and ruining it, such as bringing back finishers from Superman, the Joker and Quan Chi, ratcheting up the violence and thinking that automatically makes it better despite it being lazy and ruining the impact. The Joker's fatality was one of the best ever because it just exuded character. Slapping it onto a different character who doesn't suit it at all and adding excessive gore doesn't make it better. Grow up. Speaking of ruining fatalities, they brought back that stupid distance element to finishers. Yes, there's a practice mode for that, but it's so irritating having to align yourself properly, holding block to avoid jumping or moving into the wrong position, and having the face button do an attack if you do it wrong. You can use different camera angles to mask moving the characters into position. Why is this so hard? The PS2 games did it right with no distance malarkey and a fatality style, which stops you from moving or attacking. Stage fatalities also return, replacing the similar death traps of the PS2 days, and babalities also return for some reason. The power bar returns from DCU but altered. The bar is now split into 3 segments. Each player starts with one segment filled and whoever lands the first attack automatically gets a second. The player can spend 1 segment to enhance a special move, 2 to perform a combo breaker, or all 3 to perform an X-ray. It's not a lot, but I do admit it does add a little more strategy to the rather basic gameplay we have now. But what are X-ray moves, you ask? X-ray moves are a Marvel 3 style super attack that do a ton of damage in an over-the-top brutal animation with an X-ray to show how the move ruins the opponent's body down to their bones. It makes sense to have super move like this, but there are a few problems with the system. First, each character only gets 1, which when coupled with the fact that some of them are a bit too long, means they wear out their welcome rather quickly, just like everyone only having 1 intro and outro animation. The other problem is the level of brutality showcase, as all of them would cripple if not outright kill the opponent. I mean, look at that, Baraka impales a guy's skull, you'd never survive that. I feel like these moves and this X-ray tech should have been implemented into fatalities instead. And before you complain that I'm trying to bring realism into a fantasy fighting game, keep in mind that the level of violence is completely inconsistent because injuries just like those, or even less, kill people when done as a fatality. The distinction between the 2 moves is totally arbitrary and has no logical explanation within the game's setting. I'm just asking for a little consistency here, is that too much? And one last thing that I just cannot stand is the ridiculous difficulty in battling bosses and sub-bosses. The ludicrously hard final boss that can just no-sell attacks whenever it feels like it is an archaic concept that should have died once the genre started to move away from arcades. There is absolutely no reason for the bosses to be this cheap if the developers aren't getting any money from it. And don't be surprised if Warner Bros has NetherRealm implement a microtransaction system for retries in arcade mode to simulate the nostalgic feel of an arcade cabinet in a future title. And whoever the hell decided that the boss character should get X-rays that take 2/3 of the player's health, fuck that guy, and fuck Ermac's Impossible to Avoid X-Ray 2. I'll give the game one thing. It's full to bursting with content. All the concept art and alternate costumes you've come to expect since Deadly Alliance is present, and there really aren't many other fighting games nowadays, if any at all, with this much to unlock. The new crypt is quite cool, but the free moving nature of this version can make it tricky to navigate and find graves you've not opened yet, and that creature that roams the area to jump scare the player can go straight to hell. You have the standard arcade mode, training mode, no puzzle or motor combat like modes, but test your might and test your sight return, alongside the accuracy based test your strike and the combat modifying test your luck. But one of the biggest new additions is the Challenge Tower, a 300 stage mode of scenarios ranging from defeat Sector without taking so many hits to the head or you die, to kill all 3 bosses and Melina in one run with random modifiers. And then we have the story mode. Before I discuss the story itself, I need to go over the mode it's housed within. You see, fighting game stories are typically done in a few ways. One is just a bio and ending for each character, with canon being figured out in the next installment. Another is the same but with a few fully contextualised fights along the way. And in the case of Deception and Armageddon, a prequel story focused on one character leading into the game's main events. In recent years, however, there's been something of a shift towards a full story mode with cutscenes to transition between battles, which is typically credited to this game, although other games have had similar systems before it. This specific system debuted in MK vs DCU and has since been reused in both Injustice and MKX. And I hate it. Options are incredibly limited here. The cutscenes, which are pre-rendered and I think used to mask load times, are unskippable. Even on repeat playthroughs, there is no chapter select after finishing the mode, All fights are 2 out of 3, even though that makes no sense in a fight to the death, and they could have done something interesting by having different fights have different numbers of rounds based on the context. But the biggest problem is that the structure of the mode itself is incredibly poorly thought out. See, the way it works is the story is split into character-centric chapters, 16 in this case, each consisting of 4 fights. I think the idea is to let the player get used to the character through a few consecutive fights, rather than jumping back and forth repeatedly and forcing the player to get used to a new moveset more often. The problem is that each character gets only 1 chapter, and with very rare exceptions, will never win another fight outside of their chapter. For example, Chapter 1 is devoted to the game's best character, Johnny Cage. In this chapter, he defeats Reptile, Baraka, Sonya, and Kano one after the other in the space of about 20 minutes while they're all fresh. That's a pretty impressive opening, even if 3 of them are the jobbers of the dark side. So it makes perfect sense that he then proceeds to job to everybody. You beat him in a tournament bout in Chapter 4, then in a petty dispute in Chapter 6, then him and Smoke simultaneously in Chapter 8, he loses in a cutscene in Chapter 11, he's supposed to die against Motaro while flipping people in Chapter 12, he gets beaten in 2 hits in Chapter 15, then casually battered aside in Chapter 16. He does worse and worse over the course of the story until he is a complete joke. This is also a problem when characters suddenly become stronger once their chapter starts. Like how Sonya loses to Johnny and is then totally powerless to defend herself against Kano, only to immediately defeat Sub-Zero, who has defeated a fallen elder god, Raiden, who himself is a god, Kitana and Jade simultaneously, and then totally overpowering Kano just because. Now this worked well enough in MK vs DCU because they had an explanation for it. The MK team put a lot more thought into their superhero crossover plot than Capcom does, and wanted to explain how, say, Sonya Blade could reasonably take Superman in a fistfight. Their explanation is that the cast power levels are fluctuating, meaning the characters have different levels of strength at different times, as showcased by having Liu Kang beat Shang Tsung and Batman beat the Joker at the start, only to then have the outcomes be reversed towards the end of the story. When you play as a character, it's because the power is favouring them at that time. So basically, you play as a character in DCU because they're winning, but in MK 2011, the character is winning because you're playing as them. Does that make sense? Good, because I need to explain the other 2 major issues with the story structure. First, since you rarely play as the villains, most of them never win. How are we supposed to take the villains seriously as a threat when they lose every single time? Even the bosses lose every fight they're a part of, even if it's 2 against 1. And finally, because each chapter consists of 4 fights, with certain exceptions like the end of each act in this game, a number of fights in the story aren't necessarily all that important to the plot. In fact, quite a lot of them could be cut and you'd lose nothing in the long run. I suppose in the end there really is no perfect system for a fighting game story. You either have the player jump back and forth between characters repeatedly and risk making it too difficult for them to adjust, or you have a story where characters randomly do very well for a bit, before losing all ability to fight, and have to force in a bunch of contrived scenarios to make up numbers. I'm looking at you, Jax vs Johnny Cage. Dead or Alive 5 has basically the same setup, but it alleviates the issue somewhat by having each chapter include fights for a character that don't necessarily take place one after the other. It jumps around the timeline to retain moveset consistency for a few fights and to simply divide up the story, but it also makes the story a little hard to follow at times. But the ability to replay any match afterwards, all displayed on a convenient timeline, helps alleviate this. X-Men Next Dimension from 2002 simply had the player alternate as needed, and even allowed the player to select their character at certain points. Since it lacked chapters, they didn't need to force extra fights in to make up numbers, nor to limit a character's usefulness to just one part of the story. This allowed the most natural story flow with the least amount of filler fights. I think this is the best way to do a story mode. Plan out the story in a way that seems natural and trust in the player's ability to adapt to a new moveset. If you really think this would be an issue, give them the option to jump into training mode to try the character out from the pause menu. Not that you really need that here, since MK has, for over a decade, had the best damn moveset viewer in the genre, even displaying directional inputs appropriate to the player's position on screen, which many fighting games do not. But either way you slice it, another effect of having this kind of story mode is that the endings are almost completely inconsequential. Sure, no one ever looked at an ending where Baraka kills Shao Kahn and thought, yeah, this could totally be canon when the next game comes out, but endings are supposed to be events that could reasonably be canon, or at least that showcase what happens if this character achieves their goal. But when you have a single story mode that tells the entire story, those endings serve no purpose anymore. Sure, I get it. They don't want players to play through arcade mode as a character, only to have the ending reveal that they died in the story mode, or to simply reiterate what happens at the end. But if the ending isn't going to have even a chance of being canon, there's no point to even being there. Again, it worked in DCU because those were all vague after the conflict events and didn't go into specifics. But in a story where characters do die and where twists and shocking moments do occur, arcade endings risk spoiling the story mode. Yes, I'd miss endings if they weren't there at all, like Soul Calibur 5 or Dead or Alive 5, and I do understand why they did it, so I think the best solution would be to either lock the arcade mode until story mode is complete, or at least put up a spoiler warning. Or alternatively, they could just approach endings the way games like Tekken do, where the endings can just be simple events from the character's life, like Liu Kang's could be about his selection to compete in the tournament and Bo Rai Cho providing some words of wisdom. As is, in a roster of 32 playable characters, DLC included, a grand total of 6 endings could be canon, and to my knowledge, not a single one of them actually is. If that's not a waste of the player's time, I don't know what is. Again, fighting games are awkward sods when it comes to telling the story, and there isn't really a perfect solution to this problem, but I wish the developers would think about the problem a little more than not at all. For the story discussion this time around, I'm going to try to avoid the inconsistencies with the original timeline and discuss them in the later section. This section is just focused on the story as presented, which begins with the end of MK Armageddon. We see the corpses of various characters, most of the causes of death being unclear, though some do actually tie into the depiction of the events in Armageddon's intro. The camera pans up the Pyramid of Argus as we get a nice shot of a dead Quan Chi, but I can't help but be distracted by the fact that all the characters in this game's roster appear in their new looks, few of which even closely resemble the old looks. I know I said I tried to avoid inconsistencies, but this one is such an easy issue to fix. Just give them their Armageddon designs as alternates, or just use their current alternates that more closely resemble what they used to have. Once we reach the top, we find Shao Kahn and Raiden as the last two standing. Shao Kahn's model is blatantly just taken from the graphically inferior MK vs DCU, while Raiden's is a vague approximation of his MKA look. The idea here is that Kahn has emerged the winner by killing Blaze. They honestly expect us to believe that Kahn, having been flown into the distance by Onaga, managed to kill Onaga, bear in mind it took Shujinko with the powers of the entire Deception cast plus Striker to put him away, run all the way back, ascend the pyramid and kill Blaze before anyone else could. I just don't see it happening. And this just raises a question, where the hell is Taven? The only reference to Taven is in Raiden's visions. Blaze is only here for Taven and Dagon's sake, and yet neither brother gets so much as a passing mention, nor does Blaze for that matter. We get neither confirmation that Kahn killed Blaze, nor even a glimpse of Taven's corpse at the side of the pyramid. Writer John Vogel said on Twitter that Kahn did indeed kill Blaze, a tweet fans have horribly misinterpreted as meaning Kahn killed Taven, despite Taven not being mentioned once by Vogel. Not only did they make the conclusion of MKA's story mode non-canon, but the hero of that game, around whom the entire Armageddon event revolved, is completely unmentioned. So then Kahn is beating Raiden, who despite still being Dark Raiden is not acting like Dark Raiden. Dark Raiden is an extremist version of Raiden, like if you mix his MK1 persona with his role as Protector. He kills people for honest mistakes, revives the dead as soulless husks, makes deals with the villains and destroys all realms but Earthrealm if he wins Armageddon. But in this scene he's just good Raiden. Inconsistent writing aside, it's clear Kahn has won and nothing can be done about that. Raiden takes his amulet and prepares a spell as Kahn winds up to finish him off with his warhammer. Raiden says the phrase, "He must win," and sends visions of the events of the series back in time to his MK1 self just before Kahn caves his skull in. I have so many problems with this setup. 1. Where did this amulet come from? Raiden just has it now when he has it as far back as MK1. We're supposed to just accept that he's always had it despite it never appearing before now, and the entire plot hinges on this thing. 2. Why does Raiden have this power? Raiden is the lesser god of thunder, so why on earth does he have such an incredible temporal power? 3. Why has Raiden not used this power before? He could have prevented Onaga and Kahn's rise to power, the invasion of Edenia and Sindel's subsequent suicide, Shinnok's rebellion and the subsequent annihilation of the Saurians, the death of the great Kung Lao, the massacre at the Wuxi Academy, Kahn's invasion of Earth, Shinnok's return and the deaths of several gods, the death of Liu Kang, the deaths of the rest of Earth's heroes and Onaga's return and Raiden's own death, just to name a few. 4. He must win is stupidly vague and is worded that way solely to give the Raiden of the new timeline a hard time properly interpreting the meaning. It's not like Raiden doesn't have time to be more specific. Kahn didn't cave in his skull the instant he said win. He has enough time to say the person's name and why, but he chooses the vaguest possible wording as the crux of his whole plan. What the hell does he expect the result of this to be? 5. The game completely erases all the previous games from the timeline aside from the action-adventure prequels. As I said, this kind of reboot was used in the Star Trek film as well, but there was one key difference there. The writers of Star Trek knew that fans wouldn't be happy if they erased all of old Trek, so they made sure to have the topic of divergent timelines be brought up in a scene to establish that old Trek continues on alongside the new timeline. This game instead writes over the old timeline like a VHS, effectively making every prior installment completely irrelevant. This was probably the most offensive thing to me because it tells me that the decade I spent playing and reading up on the series and the hundreds of pounds I spent on the games all means nothing now, because it's all irrelevant to the series going forward. It tells me that my dedication as a decade-long fan was wasted on a series that doesn't give a shit about my loyalty or enjoyment of the series. But let's continue the story as MK1 Raiden receives his visions and the second timeline officially begins. Johnny Cage is dressed here in his suit from the MK1 prequel comic, but he normally fights shirtless to expose the fact that his name is tattooed on his chest. Perfect. Although the story doesn't mention it, Johnny Cage is now apparently descended from a cult that trains warriors for the gods. I guess he just didn't mention it because he realised how stupid that idea is. He's called up to fight this stupidly beat-masked reptile in the first match of the tournament, followed by Baraka. This establishes that the tournament does not follow any specific structure, and battles are just decided by Shang Tsung on a whim. Cage is then prompted to finish Baraka but refuses, angering Tsung and impressing Raiden. This prompt is only ever made at specific points in the story to showcase the winner's refusal or hesitance to kill, and at no other point. During this whole sequence, Johnny has been showing off how gloriously douchey he is.
And I'm taking you down, I'm taking you down, I'm taking you out, I'm taking you out, and I'm taking you out for dinner.
Johnny Cage is the best character in the game and almost makes it tolerable. Having taken a liking to Sonya, he brushes off Raiden's attempt to deliver exposition for new players.
Dun dun dun.
He goes after her and finds her at the pit, and seeing these stages in 3D really does make them look bizarre and unreasonable. Sonya fights Johnny to get rid of him, but he wins and Kano shows up to beat on Sonya. Johnny defeats Kano, winning Sonya over, and she explains that she's here for Jax more so than Kano.
So you know about this threat to the world stuff, right? Raiden called in the cavalry.
So it's not the levitating pensioner, the lizard man, or Tommy Scissorfist that convinces Johnny Raiden is legit, but the Aussie with the Terminator eye. Right. Sonya leaves and her chapter begins. Sonya arrives in Goro's lair where Jax is being held, only for Shang Tsung to have Sub-Zero fight her. I feel that Jax being held captive here somewhat degrades his character. Not that being captured automatically degrades a character, but Jax's introduction in the original timeline was so much better. Because originally, the first time he ever comes across anything supernatural, it's Shang Tsung blasting him in the chest with a flaming skull, burning off his shirt, and that's why Jax fights bare-chested the whole game. And what's the first thing he does after that? Has a fist fight with Kintaro. That is a badass introduction. This is just lame. Sub-Zero arrives via Ice Teleport, which is not only nonsensical, but it's not even a move he can use in combat. Raiden then shows up and refuses to let Sonya fight after he has a vision of Liu Kang's victory, which I do have to give credit for because every time this moment has been brought up since MK2, they always maintain that he used a flying kick to win. Bravo. Sonya fights Raiden, who helps her and Jax escape, where they are set upon by Katana and Jade. This match is built on the tag system the game has, but rather than having Sonya and Jax team up, this is the first of many handicap matches that are always stacked in the favour of the CPU. A mechanic exists that could create some badass moments of teamwork, and they use it for cheap difficulty. Keep this in mind because it gets ludicrous later on. After being defeated by the lone soldier, the two assassins disappear without any mention, as tends to happen with these handicap matches. Sonya calls an evac, which is shot down by Shang Tsung. Sonya fights Kano, and Raiden, Liu Kang and Johnny arrive. Raiden uses Komagrath's bizarre lightning heal power on Jax, and Raiden explains his visions to the group, all of whom are now on board with fighting Outworld. Except Jax. He's not in the tournament, so his presence is entirely pointless. Chapter 3 introduces Scorpion, whose design is objectively perfect. Raiden then has a vision of Kung Lao's presence on the island from Shaolin monks, but the details are all wrong and they don't even match up with this game because Kung Lao is clearly wearing his primary costume in the vision, but his alternate in-game. And at least Shaolin monks showed his massive hat on his back when he was disguised. Here he just pulls the thing out of his ass. Scorpion beats both Kung Lao and Nightwolf, then everyone just files out of the area, suggesting Shang Tsung gathers everyone together for 2 matches per day, then has them wait around somewhere until the following day. Raiden approaches Scorpion, having received a vision of Sub-Zero's transformation into Noob Saibot, and brokers a deal with the Spectre.
Defeat Sub-Zero if you must, but do not kill him. I fear his death will give rise to a more treacherous foe.
I will have my revenge.
Spare Sub-Zero's life, and I will request that the Elder Gods return the Shirai Ryu to the realm of mortals.
Scorpion remembering his family is a change from the original timeline, but it's one of the few that works, so I'm not too fussed about it. Later on, Scorpion bumps into Sector and Cyrax and beats them up, and we see that their human forms use the same weapons and abilities as their cyborg selves, just using different animations. I don't think any other fighting games make alternate costumes into full-on different versions like this, even though it's so damn cool. But I do have to question why Scorpion's just walking around here when before and after this chapter he spends all his time in the Netherrealm when not fighting. I mean, I wonder why in-universe, outside, it's obviously just narrative convenience. Sub-Zero then arrives and Scorpion takes him to the Netherrealm to fight because Scorpion can just casually pass between realms apparently. After the battle, Scorpion refuses Quan Chi's command to kill Sub-Zero, probably because Quan Chi hasn't showered or changed clothes in almost a decade. This prompts the Sorcerer to show a fabricated vision of Sub-Zero murdering Scorpion's wife and son, enraging the Spectre enough to immolate Sub-Zero off screen, despite the vision clearly depicting the younger Sub-Zero rather than the elder. Scorpion returns and displays Sub-Zero's easily breakable, barely even charged skull before leaving in sorrow. I have to give praise to both voice actor Patrick Seitz and whoever did the facial and body animation for Scorpion. You see, because of his mask, Scorpion's ability to emote is limited to his blank white eyes, his voice, and his body language, which really does limit how well he can display his emotions. But in spite of all that, everyone involved captured Scorpion's plight perfectly. Even the writing was pretty spot on for this section, and it's probably the highlight of the entire story. Chapter 4, however, does not fare so well. Raiden speaks to Cyrax about the Linkway Cyber Initiative and their having been hired by Outlaw to eliminate Earthrealm warriors. There's something of an issue with how they go about their mission. Instead of assassinating Earthrealm warriors between fights, they instead battle them in official tournament matches. But we know from Bo' Rai Cho's bio in Deadly Alliance that if you hail from a competing realm, you fight for that realm regardless of your allegiance. So what if they'd eliminated all of Earth's warriors? Would they just drop out and have Goro win by default? And why is Cyrax the only one of the three to actually compete? This even extends to Shang Tsung now, since his bio establishes him as being originally hailing from Earthrealm. So Cyrax doesn't like the idea of automation, and Raiden's words seem to encourage him to rebel. Baraka and Shiva follow him and fight him one after the other, claiming that Shang Tsung has terminated their agreement. Cyrax leaves the two unconscious as he heads off to confront Shang Tsung, and you start to wonder why Cyrax doesn't just kill them when they try to kill him. In fact, very few fights in this entire mode actually do end with any of the combatants dead. Shang Tsung is speaking with Sector when Cyrax appears and claims that the agreement is terminated due to Cyrax speaking with Raiden all of once. And if you actually paid attention to the 1-minute discussion, Cyrax was clearly arguing with Raiden. And were they just cutting Cyrax out and not the whole Linkway? How would the Grandmaster react upon learning that one of his top warriors had been murdered by Shang Tsung's minions? Cyrax has to fight Johnny Cage, no doubt a reference to Cyrax's hatred of Johnny Cage's hit film, Ninja Mime.
That should shut you up.
Shang Tsung prompts Cyrax to finish him just so Cyrax can show his development and refuse. Cyrax walks off and is tailed by Sector, only for Cyrax to knock him out and leave. Sector is then out of the tournament despite not actually having any official matches. Oh, and spoiler alert, Cyrax is captured and automated off screen anyway, making his victory and this entire fight completely pointless. In fact, the only thing this chapter actually contributes is the removal of Johnny Cage from the tournament, and to show that Cyrax was forced into automation, an idea that actually went somewhere in the original timeline but not this one. The MK1 section of the game comes to an end with Chapter 5. Liu Kang is now the only Earthrealm warrior left in the tournament, despite Sonya not losing an official match yet. His first fight is against Ermac, whose ending reveals that Kitana's father, King Jared, is one of the souls that makes up Ermac's being. They don't bring it up in the story mode, and that's a real shame because it's a really interesting concept. Raiden gives his thoughts on his future self's vague words and explains that the amulet was forged by the Elder Gods. Again, why only Raiden has one of these is never addressed. He believes the cracks will heal if he successfully averts that future, and concludes that the vision depicts events he must cause, meaning he must win refers to Liu Kang winning the tournament. This really drives home how stupid in-universe and contrived out-of-universe it was for future Raiden to be so vague. Liu Kang says that he trusts Raiden as set up for the progression of their relationship, but Raiden says they need to trust the Elder Gods, who aren't even the ones who sent in the visions and who routinely screw over everybody who works for them. After Raiden leaves, Kitana ambushes Liu Kang and he defeats her. She expresses her worry that she'll be punished for failing, so Liu Kang says they'll just pretend the battle never happened. It's still somewhat sudden, but this is easily the best version of their relationship development ever. The game just kind of threw it in there because the films had it first, and Shaolin monks had her despise the guy for stabbing her best friend in the face, up until the very end of the game where she suddenly hinted at feelings for him. So while it's not perfect, this setup definitely works quite well. The next match is against both Scorpion and Quan Chi, proving that there is no proper tournament rules set in place and Shang Tsung can do whatever the hell he wants. You motherfucker! You motherfucker using Scorpion like that! What the fuck, Quan Chi? See, like, now I'm more justified in hating him. The bastard. No! 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 I didn't mean to X-ray you, Scorpion. I was aiming at Quan Chi. You saw it. You saw it. Liu Kang wins before being sent to fight Goro. The fight takes place in Goro's lair despite every other tournament match before now taking place in the courtyard, except Ermac, which took place in Shang Tsung's throne room. Goro, who has dominated the tournament for 500 years, even though he's only been the champion for 450, because you're not supposed to count 50 years before his first tournament, doesn't get much build-up and just walks into the scene without much fanfare at all. Hell, Kano got more build-up than this. But something about the design of Goro's face is weird. I think he looks like a cat, but I'm not completely sure. Liu Kang wins, of course, and returns to the throne room with the music building nicely for his reveal as the winner, but it's let down a bit by the fact that everyone's apparently just been standing around and waiting without any way to actually watch the champion defend his title, and the monks watching the other matches are missing too. Liu Kang beats Shang Tsung, whose health bar icon depicts his younger self, despite Scepter and Cyrax's reflecting their alternate forms.
I concede.
He has saved Earthrealm.
The bad guys go home, Kitana sparing one last glance back at the hero of the hour and receiving a warm nod. You can see the potential here, but it's bogged down in so much bad. It's like the Star Wars prequels. Raiden looks at his amulet and sees it crack some more, indicating that the future refused to change. Shang Tsung is to be executed for his failure, but he's able to avoid the Emperor's wrath by suggesting a new approach. Meanwhile, the heroes all return to the Wuxi Academy, except for Nightwolf, whose absence is never explained. He just comes back for MK3 but misses out on MK2, which makes him come off as a dick for not sticking around to celebrate, and Raiden an idiot for not contacting the shaman to bring him back into the fold. I mean, even Shaolin Monk's Kung Lao attended the medal ceremony, and he was a jealous arsehole, so what's Nightwolf's excuse?
What's going on here? It's not my problem.
Speaking of Kung Lao, in this scene he swapped to his primary outfit, the one based on Shaolin monks. But this one makes more sense as a battle outfit and the other for ceremonies, not the other way around. That night, Raiden expresses his concerns to Jax as Shang Tsung, now restored to his physical prime and resembling both Sector and Cabal, approaches with an offer.
The Emperor proposes a single tournament to replace the current system of 10. If Earthrealm does not win, Outworld will absorb it. But if Earthrealm wins, Shao Kahn will abandon his claim to it forever.
This differs from the original version without Raiden changing anything, but it's one of the few such changes I actually like, and I'll discuss it more later. Raiden refuses, naturally, prompting Shang Tsung to open a portal to allow Tarkatans to enter, making one seriously question why Kahn can't just go to Earth himself if everyone else can. And before we bring up an explanation later on in this game, no, that does not explain why Kahn himself can't go while everyone else can. While Raiden and Shang Tsung have a fight we never learn the outcome of, suggesting Shang Tsung flees with his tail between his legs, Jax goes to fight the mutants but is soon overwhelmed. He awakens the following morning to find that Sonya has been taken, I guess to goad the heroes into accepting the terms. But why not kill or take Jax while he's unconscious? Raiden, whose previous vision of the Academy attack never triggered, has a vision of Kahn defeating MK2 and concludes that the visions depict events he needs to change, rather than cause. He accepts the terms and the heroes head to Outworld. We start MK2 following Jax, Raiden and Johnny Cage's search for Sonya, and this chapter, probably more so than any other, showcases the problems with the strict 4-battle chapter system. We learn that some Shaolin masters have been taken as well, so the two monks are off saving them off screen. We are only told this and never shown. Could have made for an interesting chapter if we weren't limited to one chapter per character unless it's Batman. If you're expecting a proper tournament structure this time, you're a poor deluded fool and I pity you, sorcerer. The impatient Jax just walks in and has to fight Baraka. After that, all tournament battles take place in the arena in front of an audience. So I guess Jax vs Baraka was a dark match. Does that mean Kahn has to describe the match to the audience when he gets to the arena? Does he use puppets or just a Tarkatan in blackface? So Raiden leads Johnny and Jax to the armory and it basically amounts to...
I have no memory of this place.
Raiden has absolutely no idea where they are.
Once again, I say, God, I'm useless.
Johnny asks about Sonya and Jax's relationship because he wants to get proper stuck in, so Jax flips out and breaks his spine. Was this really worth including as a fight? Jax loses his shit because Johnny Cage is a bit of a twat. Jade shows up to make up numbers, and with the fight quota almost filled, Raiden suddenly knows where to go, and the heroes go to the acid bath, which really looks stupid and unreasonable in 3D. Like, how easy would it be to slip off and dissolve horribly in all the acid? Sonya is apparently being held here because she tried to escape from her last holding location. They could just take her right to the arena to be executed, I don't know. It's not really clear why Kahn's keeping her around, if not to show her off at the arena, or hypnotise her into marrying him so he can legally go to Earthrealm. Because that looks totally natural for a guy with his build, and with that, Jax's chapter is now complete, meaning we'll never get to play as him with his cybernetics. The only thing iconic about his character. Good job, guys.
What took you so long?
He was busy hitting me in the face.
Sonya detects two entities entering Outworld because she had tech that could do that before she arrived on the isle. But she didn't know about Outworld before MK1, so how did she... Smoke arrived in Outworld with Sub-Zero.
We should stay together, Tundra.
I like that. Tundra was the elder Sub-Zero's name during MK1's development before they came up with the much stronger sounding Sub-Zero. The two are here to investigate the elder Sub-Zero's death because apparently neither Sector nor Cyrax felt it necessary to divulge the specifics of Sub-Zero's death to his fucking brother. Imagine if the police arrived at your home to tell you one of your relatives had died before pissing off without elaborating any further. The two split up and Smoke is immediately set upon by Kitana. He defeats her with the power he acquired when he was burned alive as a child in honour of the cult's god because turning Smoke into a lesser Gillespie makes so much sense. And then he arrives in the forest where he spies on Kano, showing Shang Tsung some Earthrealm weaponry. And this is obviously a nod to his first appearance. I really have to question why they're doing this here rather than in one of Kahn's heavily fortified strongholds, but I guess the writers figured a jobber like Smoke wouldn't be able to infiltrate a place like that. I also have to question why Kano is here at all. I'm not talking about this as a retcon, but as a logical storyline thing. When Raiden initially receives his visions, we see Kano imprisoned in Kahn's arena, as was the case in MK2, but the logic here is that Kano is supposed to have always been working for Shang Tsung, so that shouldn't have been a vision, right? And when Raiden has that vision again after the massacre, it's Sonya in Kano's place, but it's never suggested that Sonya takes Kano's place due to Raiden's interference. It seems to me that the story changed during development and the team just screwed up big time and left in this huge inconsistency, and sadly this will not be the final time this happens. Kano loses to Smoke because of course he bloody does, then Shang Tsung summons Reptile for a tag team, with Shang Tsung mocking Smoke by assuming the Elder Sub-Zero's form. Wouldn't this have made much more sense as a way of taunting Sub-Zero's brother? It's just another wasted opportunity and about the only way they could have reasonably included a mirror match in this story. Smoke somehow wins and is ambushed by a terrible looking cyborg Sector. Smoke overcomes the teleport spam but is almost captured by an army of random cyborgs/robots that exist now for some reason, only for Raiden to show up and save him. We then transition over to Sub-Zero as he... wait, is that Kratos? Huh. As he's ambushed by an even worse designed Cyrax, once again proving that him defeating Sector back in Chapter 4 actually accomplished nothing. Yeah, that was time well spent. Sonya and Jax then arrive and tell Sub-Zero about Scorpion before Ermac interrupts them and Sonya just stands there as Ermac proceeds to explode Jax's arms. This is evidently a change from the original timeline, but it's not clear what it was changed from, and we'll sadly never know now. Sonya cauterizes the wounds, which are oozing a dirty yellow pus-like substance, which is actually pretty cool, but it doesn't see use in any actual finishes for some reason. Either way, Sub-Zero beats Ermac, learns about the arena from Sonya, and tells her about a portal she can use to get back to Earthrealm, effectively eliminating both her and Jax from the tournament. Again, does Kahn then have to explain this to the audience? Sub-Zero arrives in the arena where he witnesses Kitana hesitate to finish a nondescript opponent, forcing Kahn to do it. Sub-Zero demands a fight with Scorpion, but has to beat Reptile first. Scorpion is easily one of the toughest fights I had in my most recent playthrough alongside Ermac and Kahn. but Sub-Zero emerges victorious anyway, only to be ambushed by the Lin Kuei, who pledge allegiance to Shao Kahn in return for being allowed to take Sub-Zero away. Raiden notes that he's effectively swapped Sub-Zero for Smoke, which is one of the few logical chains of events we see as far as Raiden's impact on the timeline goes. Kinda. Presumably without saving Sonya, Raiden wouldn't have known about Smoke's presence and the Lin Kuei would have taken Smoke, given up on Sub-Zero and never pledged allegiance to Kahn. I guess the one they don't take is then considered under Raiden's protection, so they just leave him alone. Kahn is super bitchy over Kitana not killing the guy just because she's the only person he ever prompts to do so, and sends her away. Sensing an opportunity, Raiden follows.
Sure, let's go ruin someone else's life.
After arguing with Jade, who doesn't hear Raiden arrive despite only being a few feet away by the time he does, Kitana beats down Johnny and Smoke together, officially beginning their jobber phase. That done, Raiden has a vision of Sindel's return, which somehow leads to him sending Kitana to Shang Tsung's flesh pits. Not a vision of Kitana's clone, but of her mother. Jade tries to stop Kitana as she passes through the forest for the same reason as Smoke's early presence there, and Kitana arrives at the flesh pits. The flesh pits have been a background concept since around Armageddon, where it was a place of origin for meat. The name sounds so awesome and evokes the image of a deep hole in the ground with walls lined with gore and a pile of viscera at the bottom, where Shang Tsung performed his arcane experiments to create his horrid abominations. And the scary part? He's getting better. How intriguing a concept is that? The name, MK vs DCU and Scarlet's DLC trailer for this game all indicate that this is indeed the case, but when Kitana actually enters the place it looks like an abandoned Umbrella lab. I mean, it looks cool and it's one of the few new locations in the game, but the look hardly evokes the same kind of awesome imagery as the name. Kitana walks past a number of failed experiments created in her image, clearly inspired by a similar scene in Alien Resurrection. She comes across Melina, who is just lying on a table in a bunch of bandages. You can actually unlock this costume in the original release of the game if you finish stage 300 of the Challenge Tower, and the team made a big deal out of it, even attaching the Best Alternate Ever achievement to its unlocking. Is it supposed to be titillating? Because I can do a quick Google search and find actual porn of Melina, some even using a modded version of her model from this game. So this costume is a really weak prize for having to put up with this.
Blocking disabled! Blocking disabled! Blocking disabled!
Melina gets up and shows off her new childish personality before being beat down by her sister. Shang Tsung then arrives. Why wasn't he here already if Melina was already finished? After beating him, Kitana drags him before Shao Kahn.
This conjurer has created horrid replicas of me.
Well done, sorcerer.
I'll save my rant for later. After revealing that he is not her father and in fact murdered her real father, Kahn sends Kitana off to the tower to await her execution at the arena, where he is going immediately after this. Once again, I'll save my rant for later, but I will ask, why did Kahn leave the arena if he was just going to go right back there? Did Kitana take Shang Tsung to the arena, then accompany Kahn back here, or was Kahn already here for no reason in the middle of the tournament? I don't know, maybe he needed a piss break. Much like Scorpion, the animation on Kitana's eyes throughout all this is fantastic and goes perfectly with Karen Strassman's powerful vocal performance to really capture Kitana's various emotions. It's a real shame the animators will never get the credit they deserve. Jade overhears and goes to free Kitana, defeating Baraka in the armory along the way. I do like the fact that we see Baraka inspecting a bunch of guns as a follow-up to the scene with Kano in Smoke's story, all foreshadowing for the ultimate invasion plan, even if an invasion plan is currently not on the table. Jade defeats Shiva, who is guarding Kitana, because when the person you put in charge of guarding a prisoner fails to keep said prisoner in prison, you obviously assign them a similar but more significant post with less backup. Jade beats her so hard, she gets swapped to her alternate costume. More guards are on the way, so Kitana urges Jade to find Raiden. She encounters Melina first and defeats her, which is witnessed by Smoke, who believes Jade has attacked Kitana despite the only visual similarity between the two being their hair colour. I initially thought at least the area around their eyes was the same, but it's actually not. Their eyebrows and even their skin tone are completely different. The eyes themselves are Tarkata and her attire is different in both colour and shape, her hair is much shorter, and even her nails are painted a different colour, clearly the most important detail there is. You really can't look at the two, especially from a distance, and conclude that the two are the same person. It's like when complete idiots mistake Shadow for Sonic in broad daylight. Smoke loses of course because he's Smoke, and Jade informs Raiden of Kitana's situation, just as Liu Kang and Kung Lao return, their 5-chapter long off-screen adventure presumably a success, though they don't actually say so.
What's Raiden got that I haven't got?
Godlike power? A personality that is not at all like sanding paper?
Jerks.
Liu Kang is shocked by what he hears despite the audio mixing being so bad you can barely make out Jade's words. Raiden is hesitant to allow the two monks to go to the tower, but since he has concluded that Liu Kang is not he who must win, Raiden allows him to go while he and the others head to the arena. Upon arriving at the tower in search of Kitana, Kung Lao calls her Liu Kang's girlfriend, both obvious references to Shaolin monks, only Kung Lao's comment makes less sense when he's not an intolerable asshole. And wouldn't you know it, she's already been moved. She wasn't even held there for an hour.
Well done, everyone! Well done!
Shiva shows up alongside Noob Saibot, fighting Liu Kang and Kung Lao respectively. Noob goes down easy, true to his name, while Liu Kang struggles with Shiva, despite having already beaten Goro by this point. Speaking of which, Goro shows up to challenge Kung Lao. I'd complained about Goro's altered role in the story and basically being made a chump, but giving Kung Lao some closure for the whole Avenge My Ancestors story he has now, it works. Even if Kung Lao then reveals him to be the reincarnation of the Great Kung Lao rather than just his descendant, which is actually impossible as the Great Soul was taken by Shang Tsung, making it impossible for him to reincarnate. Cat Phase lets it slip that Kitana's already been taken to the arena, and Liu Kang kicks him in the head limply so as not to hurt the other actor. The two arrive at the arena to find Johnny losing in a cutscene, Smoke already defeated, and Jade... Hey, where is Jade? Did she not follow Raiden? Liu Kang refuses to fight because he's in a mood about Raiden doubting him, I think? They're trying to set up a rift between the two, but Raiden hasn't really caused anything bad as far as Liu Kang knows, other than Kitana being captured, and considering the fact that Liu Kang can just walk right over to Kitana without Shao Kahn lifting so much as a finger to stop him, I don't think much bad has come from Raiden's actions so far. Also, Kitana's outfit is different here, suggesting someone stripped and redressed her for Kahn's amusement. Creepy with a capital K. Kung Lao somehow being less of a petty dick than Liu Kang despite his Shaolin Monk's attributes, is more than happy to go up and fight both sorcerers, showing where Shang Tsung got his poor understanding of rules from.
No Earthrealm born can stop this deadly alliance.
Yeah, cute. Though I do have to wonder how Kung Lao can beat the two when Liu Kang couldn't in the original timeline. Kung Lao beats both and then Kintaro before getting his neck snapped by Kahn. You have to wonder how Kahn would have managed that had Kung Lao not removed his hat to bow to the audience. I'm not really sure why they chose to have Kahn break Kung Lao's neck here, but either way Liu Kang is enraged and attacks, fulfilling his destiny by defeating Kahn with a good old Falcon Punch! With Kahn's death, Earthrealm is saved forever, but at the cost of Kung Lao's life. Not only that, the future is still not changed, meaning Kahn is obviously still alive, which Raiden somehow fails to pick up on, instead leaving with those that remain. The Outworld forces debate who should succeed Kahn without even checking for a pulse, though I suppose they're thinking, as they logically should, that a punch through the heart is obviously fatal. Even Motaro makes an appearance here. Kahn enters the scene having been saved by Quan Chi because of course he bloody was, and Kahn has the gall to blame his loss on Shang Tsung. Again, later. Quan Chi suggests outright invasion, which Kahn claims is impossible. Supposedly, Sindel sacrificed thousands of years ago created a protective ward over Earthrealm that, according to Quan Chi, provides a level of protection that even the Elder Gods can't provide. How? Why? I don't know, but what I do know is that while Kahn is too stupid to figure this out on his own, Quan Chi has figured it out despite being unable to pronounce Edenia.
So Earthrealm could not suffer as had Edenia.
Oh, and Baraka fans, enjoy the moment while you can because this is the last we see of him. Even Motaro, an NPC, shows up during the invasion arc, but Baraka?
Yeah, no.
Then again, I suppose they could be sticking to the original timeline in which Baraka did not take part in MK3, but why should that stop them now? Quan Chi resurrects Sindel under mind control to be loyal to Kahn, thereby breaking her wards. It's worth noting, however, that the fallen statue of Sindel in the background indicates that this stage is set in Edenia/Outworld. Surely casting a protective ward over Earthrealm would require her to be in, you know, Earthrealm. I don't know, I don't fucking know. This whole protective ward thing is never explained in any satisfactory manner, and just opens a big plot hole because one has to wonder, if Sindel has a protective ward over Earthrealm not connected to the Elder Gods or the tournament, then does that mean if Outworld won 10 tournaments in a row, Kahn still wouldn't be able to go to Earthrealm? It's a subject worth bringing up at least once. But apparently all that matters is that thanks to Quan Chi, Earthrealm is now open to a full-scale invasion. And this, my friends, is where things really, really get bad. The invasion begins with a focus on New York being defended by Curtis Stryker and his partner Cabal. Cabal is established as having joined the NYPD after leaving the Black Dragon and hasn't received his burns yet. Stryker, a character that has never been well liked by fans, is actually quite cool in this game thanks to some genuine effort by the developers, an actual chance at characterization through dialogue, and a solid vocal performance by Matthew Mercer.
Police brutality coming up.
I mean, at this point he's basically John McClane crossed with Leon S. Kennedy. It's fucking cool.
Stryker wins.
Also, Reptile can dodge bullets. Stryker loses his gun to Reptile but can still use it in battle, unlike when Jax casts his gun aside in DCU. Thanks to this little oversight, Stryker can just spam his opponents to death and easily overpowers both Reptile and Melina. After non-lethally frying Melina and receiving another vision, Raiden flies off to save Johnny Cage from his original death at the hands of Motaro. This detail is very important later on, so keep it in mind. I do like Stryker and Cabal's reactions though.
That guy just shot lightning from his hands. How'd he do that?
No idea.
Kintaro then arrives and breathes a stream of fire on Cabal, an ability he does not have otherwise. Shokan's strength proved no match for conventional weaponry, but before Stryker can tend to Cabal's wounds, Ermac shows up because Shao Kahn's evasion is centered around this one inconsequential bridge, and throws Stryker into the subway in a manner that he should probably die from. After gunning down Ermac because it's about the only way you can beat his broken ass, Nightwolf arrives to take Stryker, who somehow knows the term Earthrealm, to meet with Raiden's forces.
Now, it's my problem.
It's also worth noting that Nightwolf is played by Native American comedian Laurie Omaha. I don't know if he specifically wanted the role or if they just cast him because he's native. He does a good job, but he seems wasted on a joyless twat like Nightwolf. Still, it's such a shame Nightwolf hasn't changed to his other costume here because it's such a cool original design, you know? Stryker goes to find Cabal, but he's gone missing. Chapter 13 follows Cabal, now fitted with a respirator and some cool looking burns on his arms. Kano explains that Shang Tsung's magic fixed him, but he can't fully heal him. Why? And what exactly did he heal if Cabal's still so horribly messed up? All I can assume is that this is yet another way of putting Quan Chi over Shang Tsung, because that pasty white bastard can heal a hole in the chest and resurrect the dead, but external burns are just too much for feeble old Shang Tsung.
Yeah, you're all proper police now. The Black Dragon ain't the same without you, mate. You should come back.
I like the dynamic and the implication of past friendship here. Cabal refuses and takes Kano captive, forcing him to take him to an exit. The exit in question is a portal in Kahn's throne room, through which Motaro's corpse is being brought. Sindel volunteers to finish Motaro's work, for we must honour the guy who never did or even said anything. Fuck me, this is stupid. Kahn calls Shang Tsung forward and kills him. Why? Does he think this was Shang Tsung's fault too? Now some may say Kahn simply chose to kill his least important servant to power up Sindel, but why not use what's left of Motaro, or Baraka, or Reptile, who have never won a fight of significance? As Kahn powers Sindel up, Cabal fights off Melina and Noob, which Kahn stops to watch. Okay. Cabal escapes through the portal before Quan Chi can close it, and arrives on the bridge. Of course. He's then attacked by the Lin Kuei's newest unit, Sub-Zero. After that, Shiva mistakes Cabal for Lin Kuei because of the vaguely similar masks, I guess. After the battle, Raiden and Smoke arrive with... What the hell is that on his head? Who looked at this and thought this was a good design, I ask you?
Smoke equals bad.
That which made him Sub-Zero no longer exists.
He is my friend. What they did to him, it is hideous.
You're right. We gotta help him if we can.
It's a shame this angle doesn't go anywhere because there's a lot of potential here with Cabal seeing the parallels between himself and Sub-Zero. Again, limiting focus on each character to just one chapter each limits the story potential. Cyber Sub-Zero has his free will restored by Jax, a reference to Cyrax's story in the original timeline, and we see that Jax's arms are visibly fused to his torso, a nice touch, before Sub-Zero is given the lead for chapter 14. I guess he really did turn into Batman.
You are no Sub-Zero. I'm Batman.
He expresses guilt over what he did while reprogrammed, but it's never elaborated upon, and Stryker suggests going undercover to learn more about Kahn's plans, only for Sector to see right through it immediately and get his ass kicked. I can't decide if this was pointless filler or a hilarious subversion. After hacking into Sector's database, Sub-Zero learns of some soldiers being held at the clock tower. Sub-Zero heads over, incapacitating Kano, Goro and Kintaro no problem, and frees the soldiers. The Shokans break free and flail their arms around awkwardly until Sub-Zero defeats them. Simultaneously. In gameplay. This part is tough, and I want you to remember this raw display of power because it's very important that you do. The soldiers are thrown back by Ermac, who was swapped out of his awesome Space Wizard outfit for his original just for this one fight. He's quickly dispatched thanks to Cyber Sub-Zero actually having a decent moveset. Sub-Zero is told about more soldiers in the graveyard, which he reports to Raiden, triggering a vision of the Soulnado from MK3. Nightwolf heads over to meet up with Sub-Zero while the cyborg runs interference. Naturally, it's Quan Chi who is creating the Soulnado because let's give every noteworthy success to that Murray Sue. Noob is with Quan Chi as he was during Sindel's resurrection, only now he's wearing his cool Reaper-like outfit.
Who is that? The one Kano warned about.
What, did Kano Thor cannonball his way over to tell them and cannonball away before Sub-Zero arrived? I don't know, I just can't see Noob or Quan Chi carrying a radio around. Noob reveals himself to be the original Sub-Zero, revived as a wraith by Quan Chi because you get the idea. Both brothers' names are finally revealed here, but they don't even share a family name.
Yes, Kuai Liang. It is I.
Fun fact, aside from a brief one-panel flashback in the MK4 comic, this is the first time the two brothers have ever interacted on screen. In any medium. It's a real shame too, because their exchange here is one of the better ones in the game.
You and I both. We are flawed copies of our former selves.
I have no flaws. Quan Chi has perfected me.
For what end? To serve the Netherrealm and Outworld?
It suits my purpose.
But brother,
We share blood. We are not brothers.
Then I will not regret your defeat.
That's the tragedy of this game. There are some genuinely great moments, but they're so heavily overshadowed by a mountain of terrible ideas. It's like the Star Wars prequels. Yeah, I fucking went there. Nightwolf arrives as the Soulnado is completed.
Go! Your soul is not safe!
How is yours safe if the cyborg's isn't? Oh, it's because you're one with the spirits and all that shit, okay. Sub-Zero makes no attempt to save his brother while Nightwolf defeats Quan Chi and kicks Noob into the Soulnado, corrupting and destroying it. I guess. Sadly, I'm aware that my awesome idea of Noob escaping into the void and becoming the Elder Gods champion as Scorpion did in the original timeline, and being purified into a Sub-Zero Noob hybrid did not come to pass in the game's sequel, because that would diverge from the original timeline in a cool way rather than a ruinous one. Nor sadly does Quan Chi go this time. Nightwolf returns to the others who are questioning how much has changed as a result of Raiden's actions, and you start to realise not much really by this point, meaning that any significant change has to occur sometime in the next chapter and a half. By now, Liu Kang, Sonya, Kitana and Jade have finally returned without explanation, and Raiden goes to speak with the Elder Gods about Kahn's blatant disregard for the rules of Mortal Kombat. He takes Liu Kang with him and leaves Nightwolf in charge. Not the 10,000-year-old princess or the military or police forces, the guy who decided MK2 wasn't worth his time. And it's not for any logical narrative reason, it's because he's the one you happen to be playing as at the time. Raiden doesn't really have a reason to take Earth's Best Warrior with him other than narrative convenience, as the Lin Kuei teleport into the cathedral immediately after he leaves. Strangely, the cathedral is evidently not connected to either the bell tower or the graveyard, even though that would make sense. Nightwolf beats Cyrax and saves Smoke from Sector because it's not like Smoke could ever stand up to Sector or anything. With all the Lin Kuei down, Sindel enters the scene and Mortal Kombat is completely ruined in a single 1-minute sequence. Sindel plows through everyone, taking them all down in up to 3 hits, killing almost everyone. These characters have, respectively, sealed up the Soulnado and defeated the Lin Kuei cyborgs, won 4 straight matches in about 20 minutes, defeated Cyber Sub-Zero, beaten Kintaro despite having no powers or special training, defeated Goro and Kintaro simultaneously, beaten a Shokan without any powers or enhancements, beaten Shang Tsung and Reptile simultaneously, beaten Kitana and Jade simultaneously, beaten a Shokan, and beaten Johnny Cage and Smoke simultaneously. Aside from the fact that this scene forces almost the entire good guy roster to job worse than Santino fucking Morella, it's also the worst, most sloppily thrown together attempt at raising the stakes I have ever seen in my life. The heroes going in one at a time and not using their powers or weapons is illogical and contrived because they're not fighting to their strengths. And Shang Tsung's power alone should not be enough to give Sindel an edge of this magnitude, especially since Shang Tsung is degraded to the point of being a complete joke in this game, and he has never been known for his physical prowess, but for his mastery of sorcery. It's like taking the power of Doctor Strange and then being able to take the Hulk in a fist fight. If you had to kill off most of the heroes, why couldn't the deaths have been spaced out more across the story? Let Kitana be executed or have Jade die to save her. Have a few of them die in the tournaments or the invasion. Have Smoke be killed by Sector and one or two others die in the ambush. Then have Sindel charge in and beat down those that are left once they're tired out and lucky to have survived. And let them take some villains with them as well, because the state Earth forces are left in by the end of the game makes it fucking ludicrous that they could ever pull back, especially with what's to come later. While this stupid shit goes on, Raiden speaks with the Elder Gods, who say possibly the stupidest fucking thing I have ever heard in my life.
He invades Earthrealm as we speak.
Invasion is not itself a transgression. It is the merger of realms that is prescribed.
You heard that right. The Elder Gods, who established the Mortal Kombat tournament to prevent realms from being invaded by Outworld without a fighting chance, the violation of whose rules is considered a transgression serious enough to evoke the wrath and intervention of the Elder Gods, just now said that invasion is legal, but merging realms is not. You can't just change a fundamental fact about your franchise's setup like this. The entire focus of the franchise's story has been completely disregarded to accommodate this abhorrent plot and its stupid bloody twist at the end. A commenter on the original review suggested that the idea ties into the series' creation myth as established in Deception, that the Elder Gods defeated the One Being and split his body into the realms, and that merging the realms will restore the One Being. They propose that this is the reason for the change to the rules of the tournament, as it's more about stopping the One Being than Shao Kahn. While it's certainly a possibility, I doubt this is what the devs were going for. For one, they don't even mention the One Being in the game, and instead present the ultimate threat of Armageddon as being Shao Kahn's victory rather than the One Being's return or the collapse of all existence. And even if we were to accept this, Kahn's invasion is intended to lead directly into a merger, which the game seems to indicate is actually happening simultaneously as a result of the invasion. The Elder Gods won't step in to prevent the thing they set up preventative measures to prevent, but they will step in if he succeeds in doing the thing they want to prevent. It's like if the police refuse to stop a murder attempt they're aware of, and only step in once the victim is dead. The Elder Gods leave somewhere, it's like storming out of your own house when you have guests, so Raiden and Liu Kang return in time to witness Nightwolf sacrifice himself to kill Sindel, because he's a Mary Sue now too. Kitana is able to basically confess her love to Liu Kang before she dies, meaning only Johnny and Sonya survive the encounter because there's a massive bias towards MK1. Liu Kang has lost all hope in Raiden, who leaves to form an alliance with Quan Chi because of course Quan Chi is the only possible hope for Earthrealm. Chapter 16 sees Raiden meet Scorpion, who is wearing the dumbest set of armour in the world and who I had completely forgotten was even in the game by this point the first time through. After the fight, Quan Chi appears and Raiden, desperate, offers the souls of the dead Earth warriors as payment for Quan Chi's assistance. I've seen a fair few people expressing disgust at Raiden for this, and I do see it, but the idea is that Raiden is losing hope and he's desperate to find any way to fight off Kahn, even offering his own soul as well. I'm not as offended about this part as others because my attention is more focused on the fact that Quan Chi already has the souls of the dead Earth warriors because Shao Kahn gave them to him. Because all of a sudden, Shao Kahn has jurisdiction over the souls of the other side's warriors. I also have to question how Quan Chi is able to revive people as spectres, wraiths, humans or revenants, and why he doesn't just pick the best one and stick with it, and why does Scorpion still have his free will when the others don't. Maybe it's because they're attributing a series of unconnected transformative resurrections to a single source without putting any actual thought into it. Quan Chi sets the heroes on Raiden in threes, Jax, Cabal and Striker, then Kitana, Kung Lao and Nightwolf. You may notice that not only are the zombie designs more damaged during gameplay than in cutscenes, and have red eyes instead of white, but that Kung Lao and Striker actually change costumes between the two. At first I figured it was because those two were in their alternate costumes when they died, and gameplay here uses the defaults. But Kitana died in her alternate and she keeps hers. Clearly there was some miscommunication between the cutscene and gameplay guys, and a lack of anyone paying attention during playtesting, leading to this easily spotted and fixed issue. Also, Cyborg Zombie Sub-Zero, what the hell? Now long-time fans of MK may ask why Deception is my favourite entry in the series, when the whole heroes revived under mind control thing was done there first. Well, the difference is threefold. First, it happened to way less characters, so there's still a decent number of heroes taking part in the game's main story on the good side. Second, that entire plotline was introduced and resolved within a single game. Sure, we didn't know the canonical resolution until 2 years later, but 2 different endings delved into the issue, with one even revealing that Onaga's death would free the heroes, thereby making it clear that the heroes would indeed be freed by the next game, unless Onaga lived, which he didn't. Third, the way the heroes died was left to our imagination. We already had a clear idea of how powerful the 2 sorcerers were, and they had an army of Tarkatans and possibly Onaga's undead army at their beck and call. It's not difficult to accept the heroes fighting valiantly only to be overwhelmed and killed by a much larger force, but having a single character with unspecified levels of power plough through double the number of victims and kill them all so trivially and in such a short space of time is just atrocious storytelling. Plus, we only had to wait 2 years for specific details to a plot we knew was resolved, rather than 4 years for any kind of resolution. Thanks to Quan Chi's words, Raiden finally realises what he must win means and leaves to enact his final plan. Liu Kang is waiting at the portal and Raiden tells him his plan is to let Kahn win, because the Elder Gods will step in and deal with Kahn if his plan succeeds. Then why the fuck am I even here if the way you beat the villain is by letting him win?
We can stop this by doing nothing. We'll do nothing.
Liu Kang is as fed up with this shit as I am, challenging Raiden and leading to one last twist of the knife to make this game completely irredeemable. Liu Kang prepares his flaming fists and Raiden blasts him with lightning, causing a reaction with Liu Kang's fire, burning the hero to death. He is not killed by a villain or by Raiden as a last resort, no. The protagonist of the franchise is killed by accident. Liu Kang is the series protagonist. Back in 2002, Liu Kang was killed by the Deadly Alliance. This was used to showcase just how dangerous this new threat was, that they could eliminate the guy that defeated Goro, Shang Tsung, Kintaro, Shao Kahn and Shinnok. This single event fundamentally changed the direction of the series forever. Up until then, Liu Kang was always the hero. With his death, the hero changed in every game, sometimes not even having a central protagonist at all. Then we come to this. A new timeline, a complete do-over, and Liu Kang dies again. But what does it achieve? What does it contribute aside from showing just how fucked Earthrealm is when MKX rolls around? Sure, he was never as interesting as most of the rest of the cast, but few protagonists actually are. He's like Ryu, Akira, or even Goku or Superman. They're not the most fleshed out or compelling characters, but they stand as a central figure in their stories. They deserve to be shown respect. And even if you don't like Liu Kang at all and would prefer him to be dead, you cannot deny that the death of someone with his level of importance in the game's world should be treated as a major event. An event that forever changes the status quo, rather than simply being a part of the status quo. I just want this to be over. Kahn swats Johnny and Sonya aside and Raiden gets beaten with the same dialogue and animation as the intro, which strikes me as the devs being lazy more so than an attempt at being artsy with a parallel to bookend the story. The Elder Gods finally get off their lazy asses and possess Raiden to give him the power to defeat Kahn, which is still not enough until it randomly is and Kahn explodes for no reason. The remaining heroes are left to rebuild, unaware that Shinnok is about to launch his own invasion against a grand total of 3 heroes.
It is doomed.
We're not even told if the realms did fully merge, and if so, if Kahn's death undid it. Even the second movie that everyone hated did at least that much. And I have one more, very important question. Why does Raiden not use the amulet again? It's never indicated that he can't. In fact, when Kahn dies, the amulet repairs itself from its shattered state. They could have easily had the amulet break as things change, rather than as they didn't, then shatter once the timeline was averted. I get what they were going for. If Raiden fails to avert Armageddon, he won't get a second chance. But it makes way more sense to let him have infinite chances until he gets it right, rather than leave it open to be used again without him actually doing so. Or have it break after one use either way so that you keep the high stakes, and also justify why Raiden doesn't use it now, and why he's never used it before. How did they not put at least that much thought into a plot device around which this entire story revolves? But with the story discussion finally concluded, I have a few particular story elements I'd like to go into in greater detail, starting with two things that simply do not work together at all. With this being ostensibly a time travel story, a major focus is witnessing how the timeline is altered as a result of Raiden's attempt to create a better future, with every deviation leading to a whole series of changes that start small, but have completely rewritten MK history by the time the Emperor's helmet hits the floor, right?
Boom. Butterfly effect.
Well, there is one particular detail that's so incompatible with this kind of story that this important focus is completely obscured. In case you're unfamiliar, a retcon, or retroactive continuity, is when previously established details in a series are contradicted by a newer story, and the newer version of events is used going forward. MK is no stranger to retcons, and I'll provide a few examples here. Kano was initially listed as an American orphan raised in Japan, hence a Japanese name, but from Deadly Alliance onwards he was made Australian to honour the performance of Trevor Goddard in the first movie. Shao Kahn and Goro were killed off in Deadly Alliance, only to then be revealed as having survived in the GameCube port of Deception. And finally, Raiden entered the tournament in the first game to prove the might of the gods, only for MK2 to then claim Raiden is and always was the protector of Earthrealm, and serves as the Earthrealm equivalent to Shang Tsung in the tournament. So how does this conflict with the time travel plot? Again, the whole concept of the story is that Raiden is changing things based on his visions, but how is a player supposed to be able to track the changes and truly appreciate how different this new timeline is when so many details are being changed in a way that Raiden's actions couldn't possibly have an impact on? In the original review I tried to keep track of them all, but I'm sure I missed tons of them. I won't go that in depth here, but let's look at a few notable examples that really showcase what I'm trying to get across here. 1. More characters on the island. Presumably in an attempt to add more fights and variety of opponents for the MK1 section, the number of present characters more than doubled. All of a sudden, Kitana, Jade, Nightwolf, Quan Chi, Baraka, Shiva, Kung Lao, Sector, Cyrax, Ermac and Jax are all present on the island when they weren't in the original timeline. And all of them are even here before Raiden first receives his visions. Now this could have been justified if Raiden had received the visions a month or more before MK1, and begun recruiting more warriors to help him change the future, with word reaching Outworld and Kahn granting more warriors to Shang Tsung to help even the odds. But no, these characters are just here now before Raiden receives his visions, meaning he couldn't possibly be responsible for this and we're just supposed to accept it. And worse, there isn't even a good reason for these characters to be added here other than to pad out the atrociously paced story mode. Kitana is present to set up her relationship with Liu Kang earlier so that her later death carries more weight and helps justify Liu Kang turning against Raiden. Jade is present because Kitana is. Sector and Cyrax are here to showcase them as humans and establish Cyrax's feelings on the direction the Lin Kuei are heading before his conversion. Kung Lao and Baraka are here because of Shaolin monks. Nightwolf is here because he makes sense as an opponent for Scorpion due to being in tune with the spirits. Quan Chi is present because they need to set him up as the main villain. Shiva has no reason whatsoever, and Ermac shouldn't have even been created yet. 2. Character motivations and allegiances. The Lin Kuei are a baffling alteration here. Originally, Sub-Zero was hired to assassinate Shang Tsung by an unknown party. Even after Bi-Han's death, Kuai Liang's goal in MK2 was not simply to avenge his brother, but to finish his mission. Then in MK3, the bios of the cyborgs expressly mention that they could be a threat to Kahn. The whole idea of the Lin Kuei being hired to fight for Shao Kahn stems from other media like the movies and TV shows. The Lin Kuei never works for Kahn, whether run by the original Grandmaster, Sector or Sub-Zero. Similarly, Sonya isn't supposed to be here to find Jax. Kano jumped on the boat as it was leaving and Sonya went after him. In fact, Jax's presence is never really explained in the story, nor justified in gameplay because he isn't involved in any fights during the MK1 section, ultimately making his inclusion completely pointless. Kitana, Jade and Shiva are the same as they don't take part in tournament battles either. Speaking of Kano, his story has been completely redone as well. Kano isn't supposed to serve Shao Kahn until MK3, he's even held prisoner by Kahn in MK2 alongside Sonya. In MK3, he fights Sonya and gets kicked off a skyscraper. He's saved by Motaro, who is then murdered by Shiva. Kano teams up with her to murder Kahn, but secretly tells Kahn about it, allowing him to ambush Shiva and run her through with a sword. Kahn then offers to reward Kano and he asks to be Kahn's general, but now he's just working for Outworld from start to finish. The Shokans are another anomaly. Originally Goro was presumed dead after MK1 right up until MK4. As a result, his father King Gorbak assigned Kintaro to fight for Kahn in the Outworld tournament. Kintaro's own death is presumably the reason Shiva became involved and was assigned the role of protecting Sindel rather than a central role like her predecessors. And the fact that Goro was agreeing to an alliance with Kitana and making peace with Kung Lao when he resurfaced suggests that he only continued serving Shang Tsung as long as he did out of obligation rather than loyalty. Naturally, this game throws it all out and has Goro stick around and display loyalty to Kahn, has Kintaro just be there in MK2 anyway without any mention of Goro's father, suggesting that Kintaro was always there and just hanging out in Outworld during MK1, while Goro took part and Shiva bummed around on the island. I think some of these are a result of the gross oversimplification of allegiances the series has suffered since around 2005. MK Shaolin Monks was an action-adventure spin-off that reimagined the events of MK2 to centre around the titular monks defeating everyone. Whether because they wanted more boss fights or due to the influence of other media based on the series, everyone not previously designated an Earthrealm hero was presented as a servant of Outworld instead. This carried over into MK Armageddon where damn near the entire 63 character roster got grouped into a mere two factions of good and evil, regardless of how little sense that made. Like Scorpion was fighting alongside his nemesis Quan Chi, the true neutral Nitara was designated as evil, the Black and Red Dragon factions fought for the villain side, and it was completely inconsistent. I imagine this stems from how diverse the motivations and allegiances had gotten in Deadly Alliance and Deception, where only a handful of characters actually took part in the central conflicts. There were a bunch of multi-character subplots about things like realm restorations and civil wars. There was so much going on, I can only imagine the writers either couldn't keep up or thought the fans wouldn't be able to, and just decided to make things simple, but things became far too simple. It kind of ended up like a 90s cartoon version of a fighting game where everyone is divided neatly into the good guys and the bad guys to do battle every Saturday morning, regardless of how little sense that made for the individual characters. Oh, and just a side note, to the guy who commented on the original review saying I don't know MK lore, I fucking dare you to say that again. 3. Raiden's visions. Leaving aside the obviously different designs for the cast, some of Raiden's visions are inconsistent with the old timeline, and some even with this one. Instead of turning to stone and shatter in MK2 Kahn is Falcon punched through the chest. Yes, Kahn wouldn't survive being shattered, but I'm fairly sure he couldn't survive being punched through the heart either. Nor could the straps of his clothes for that matter. MK3 Kahn is defeated on some nondescript rooftop with his throne on it as opposed to inside his massive fortress. Kano is seen imprisoned in the arena as was the case originally, but this game gives no indication that the outcome could happen since Raiden's actions bring about no change that could affect it, and when Raiden sees that vision again later, Sonya is there instead. I think this really does prove that there was a lack of communication between certain team members, or that something changed mid-development and it was never fixed. And as a side note, the initial stream of visions lack some of the visions Raiden has later on, and some of them are clearly different. 4. The tournament climax. The tournament's ending is totally different from its original portrayal. After Goro's defeat, a desperate Shang Tsung set an army on the remaining warriors. Liu Kang fought Shang Tsung in private, Raiden and the ninja fought the army, and the other three warriors fought Goro. Liu Kang won, Scorpion murdered Sub-Zero after the battle, and everyone but Cage fell into a fiery chasm, but Raiden saved Cage. Now, Scorpion and Sub-Zero fight without Raiden changing anything before then, and Shang Tsung fights Liu Kang in the open, and the island doesn't collapse anymore in spite of... 5. Shaolin Monks' influence. As stated, Shaolin Monks reimagined the end of MK1 and the entirety of MK2. Some of these changes carried over into MK 2011's version of events such as Kung Lao and Baraka's presence on the island, Reptile being more reptilian before MK4, Goro's publicly known survival, Kano and Scorpion's association with the villains, the heroes being present for the Shaolin Massacre, the heroes being together from the start instead of coming together later, and Kung Lao referring to Kitana as Liu Kang's girlfriend to name a few. It may also be why Sub-Zero and Smoke don't show up at the academy to join up with them and are instead encountered in Outworld. But other details are not carried over from Shaolin Monks but rather the original version of events from MK2, such as the reason for Kitana's loyalty, the role of the other heroes, the structure of the tournament, etc. The fact that only certain elements carry over while others don't makes it very difficult to know what is supposed to be different as a result of Raiden's actions. 6. The Outworld Tournament stipulations. In MK2, Liu Kang and Kung Lao went to Outworld for revenge, Jax to save Sonya, Sub-Zero to complete his brother's mission, and Johnny Cage... Okay, Johnny Cage didn't really have a reason, and Raiden just showed up because he had to be the mentor figure. But really, Earth didn't have much to gain from winning, it was basically just another normal tournament being held in Outworld. Either side's victory would just be a single victory out of the necessary 10. For the reboot, they alter the story so that Kahn is raising the stakes for both sides, though himself more so since Raiden has no interest in invading Outworld, so Kahn has the most to lose. This gives the heroes more of a reason to go and adds more risks to MK2 because the tournament is now the equivalent of the full set of 10. Despite this, they do still take Sonya captive to coax the heroes into agreeing. They also take some Shaolin Masters captive as well instead of just killing them as they originally did. It's an odd plot point that exists purely to get the two monks out of the story for a while. But as I said before, I do like the stipulation change to an extent because it doesn't seem too intrusive like the others. I suppose I could say it feels like they're adding additional context rather than changing context that's already there. But even so, it was a change that didn't result from Raiden's actions, despite it being very easy to make it so. Have Kahn become suspicious or aware of Raiden's additional knowledge and raise the stakes so he can be rid of Raiden sooner. 7. Kitana and Mileena. The game suggests that Kitana only went to the flesh pits because of Raiden's visions. If that's the case, then what was Kitana's reason for turning against Kahn in the first timeline? It can't be the discovery of Mileena later because Mileena was originally with Kitana when Shang Tsung had his youth restored. Mileena's deception bio suggests Kitana's memories had been altered and that they returned during MK2, but nothing of the sort is suggested here. In addition, Mileena now has a random childish personality that does make sense, but she was just fine as the savage woman she originally was. And again, she's supposed to have been around for years by this point instead of being less than a year old by the time she's introduced. Yeah, she's less than a year old. Just remember that the next time you crack one off in the corner over a third costume. 8. The Invasion. Pretty much everything about this story is wrong. Originally, Sindel was revived in Earthrealm so Kahn could legally travel to Earthrealm to reclaim his bride, which is said to have been a plot Kahn had in the works for thousands of years. In this game, Sindel's death protects Earthrealm from Kahn somehow, and she's revived in Outworld. I can only assume they made this change to accommodate the whole defeat the villain by letting him win thing, which wouldn't have worked had Kahn's invasion been legal as it originally was. Kahn himself originally oversaw the invasion from a massive self-aggrandizing temple that appeared in Earthrealm, instead of his throne room in Outworld. Also, I was always under the impression the Soulnado was a major event that occurred right at the start of the invasion, leaving only a handful of people left to fight against Outworld. Then again, the sequence of events leading up to the collapse of the Soulnado is about the only change made that has a logical flow from beginning to end, so I'll leave it alone. And Raiden being able to defeat Liu Kang is questionable since the realms are supposed to be merging and Raiden's power is limited in Outworld. It's the entire reason he wasn't playable in the original MK3. 9. Quan Chi. He should be in the Netherrealm helping Shinnok prepare for their invasion, not helping Kahn with his. He should also not be Scorpion's master, it is bullshit. 10. Alternate time travel laws. This one's a little different. I recall there being a time travel theory I don't remember the name of, that if you change time, the timeline will find a way to correct itself. For instance, if Raiden saves Smoke from automation, the universe would conspire to make sure Smoke meets his original fate. In the game, Kabal receives his burns from Kintaro despite Kintaro being killed in the Outworld tournament originally, meaning the cause of his burns had to be different in the original timeline, but he ended up burned either way from two different causes. Likewise, Jax's arms are destroyed by Ermac in the new timeline. He and Sonya are only there to find Sub-Zero, and Sonya was still in prison by this time in the original timeline, meaning Jax wouldn't have gone to this location in search of Sub-Zero. So either Jax ended up in the same place in both timelines for two different reasons, the same event took place elsewhere, or he still ended up with the cybernetics in both timelines for two different reasons. These events are completely at odds with the way time travel works at every other point in the game. Sure, one could probably argue it's just a massive coincidence, but it seems so out of place and it was a perfect opportunity to shake things up more. Like maybe Jax could get different cybernetics this time, or Kabal could simply not get burned. There are others like design changes, the backstory of the Sub-Zeros, the use of the phrase Deadly Alliance, and Sonya's father suddenly being dead, but if I went in depth on all of them we'd be here all day. But before I wrap this section up, I'd like to discuss one last thing in regards to the game's bad continuity. One theory thrown out by fans is that since Shinnok's Armageddon ending reveals that he sent a double of himself rather than attending the battle himself, he survived and was thus able to send visions of his own to his past self to set plans into motion before Raiden's visions arrive, and the main piece of evidence they use is this line.
Your plan worked to perfection, Lord Shinnok.
This is supposed to explain why so much is already different before Raiden receives his visions. It's a good theory that probably would have made me rethink my entire view of how the time travel aspects were handled had it been revealed at the end. However, I don't think this is what the writers were going for. To me, the line simply refers to Quan Chi's manipulation of everyone to weaken Earthrealm and Outworld's forces to leave them vulnerable to Shinnok's own invasion plan. But if Shinnok was doing that, why would he not prevent Quan Chi from tricking him with a fake amulet? Or why not send visions to himself before his original coup against the Elder Gods to better prepare? Even if it does explain the abundance of retcons, it still makes Shinnok look like the same level of idiot Raiden is presented as in the game. Now at the time of this writing, I have not played through MKX yet, as I wanted to keep my experience of this game as pure as possible without knowledge of MKX influencing my opinion. Well, that and it's a WB game, so of course they were going to do a complete edition a year later anyway. As such, it is entirely possible that any of these inconsistencies could be explained, possibly even revealing that Shinnok did indeed influence time. Even if that is the case though, it still doesn't make this game's story any less of a mess, as a story really should be able to stand on its own, without needing a sequel to act as a crutch to cover up how poorly written the original story actually is. One retcon I'd like to discuss a little more as part of this segment is the additional characters on the island. Once again, Kitana, Jade, Nightwolf, Quan Chi, Baraka, Shiva, Kung Lao, Sector Cyrax, Ermac and Jax were not in MK1. Their presence here is a retcon. There was no need to include these characters here because the game fails to make proper use of both the new additions and the actual MK1 roster. Jax, Shiva, Kitana, Jade and Sector don't even have tournament matches. You know who else doesn't have any tournament matches? Sonya, Kano and Sub-Zero. 3 characters who were already in MK1 do not have any matches. You may think they do, but they don't. Sub-Zero fights Sonya as an assassination attempt and there is no crowd present. The rest of Sonya's chapter is a series of battles outside the tournament bracket and she only ever loses to Johnny Cage. How can Liu Kang be the only one left if Sonya isn't eliminated? The only explanation is that she is not part of the tournament herself. Kano fights Johnny Cage and Sonya in random encounters. If Shang Tsung's presence at the fight with Sonya makes it official, then Sonya is a participant herself, meaning her not being eliminated is indeed a plot hole. Sub-Zero's fight with Scorpion is not officially sanctioned as Shang Tsung is not present to oversee the battle, and the two are fighting on the same side, meaning them fighting each other would be counterproductive to Outworld. But let's ignore all that for now and break this down to show just how unruly and random this tournament is. Johnny Cage has matches with Reptile and Baraka on the first night. The following morning, Scorpion battles both Kung Lao and Nightwolf. The next day, Cyrax fights Johnny Cage, followed up that night by Liu Kang vs Ermac, then capping it all off the night after that with Liu Kang vs Quan Chi and Scorpion, Goro, and finally Shang Tsung. And yes, this is the passage of time, not just different times on different parts of the island, because the pit and courtyard both have 2 different times of day. Leaving aside the 2 special matches, our competitors are split into 4 for Earthrealm and 6 for Outworld. How would you organise matches with that? If you paired them up, you'd have 2 from Outworld left over. What are they supposed to do, fight each other? That would run completely contrary to the faction setup. Would they just be saved over to fight random Earthrealm heroes that win? The only ways I could see this working are 1. Winner stays on like in a fighting games team match mode. 2. Herd them all up for 1 round, then arrange another random set of matchups between those that are left every round until all of one side is out. 3. Establish a single elimination tournament with the first round consisting of matchups of competitors from opposing realms, and have the winners move on to the next opponent regardless of the 2's home realms. But even then, it just doesn't make any sense. Like, what if there are multiple Earth Warriors left by the time the Outworld 6 are eliminated? How do you decide who fights Goro? And what if all the Earth heroes lose? Do the remaining Outworld Warriors have to fight Goro? Tekken and Street Fighter make way more sense because while there may be conflict between factions, those aren't the central focus of the tournament's creation. The tournament system implies structure and order, but there's none to be found here. Dead or Alive 5 story mode does include a proper single elimination bracket with 8 competitors that can easily be tracked. In this game, Johnny Cage has 2 fights on the first night, then fights Cyrax, who has yet to win before now, and Liu Kang doesn't have a single match until after the other Earth heroes are all eliminated. All of this applies to the Outworld tournament too. Jax beats Baraka and officially forfeits by leaving Outworld. Kitana fights some guy and is forced out of the tournament by Kahn. Sub-Zero fights Reptile and Scorpion before being removed from play by the Lin Kuei. Ermac beats Johnny Cage and doesn't get another match. Smoke loses to someone, possibly Ermac. Kung Lao fights the 2 sorcerers and Kintaro before Kahn breaks his neck, followed by Liu Kang defeating Kahn. As you can see, most of the competitors don't actually lose and instead forfeit, making Kahn's tournament a complete farce. Could you imagine actually watching this thing where people win one fight and then just piss off home? And apparently the fact that I like just a little thought to be put into my fighting game story makes me weird and unreasonable by the internet standards. Ever since the release of MK 2011, I've had an intense hatred for the character of Quan Chi. You may not have noticed it, I don't really talk about it that much. His role in the story and other details surrounding him disgust me. To probably explain why, I have to go back to the beginning and explain the histories of both the Necromancer himself and the plotline he was unceremoniously crowbarred into. Quan Chi debuted as a one-off villain in the 1996 cartoon Mortal Kombat Defenders of the Realm. He appeared only in episode 8, where he used a gem to fill the heroes' hearts with hate to turn them against each other. Nightwolf was absent at the time and thus unaffected. After Nightwolf shattered the gem, Quan Chi and was never heard from again. He was probably intended as a stand-in for the dead Shang Tsung, similar to Karbarak and Komodai, even though Shang Tsung does appear later. Much like Harley Quinn and Batgirl, Quan Chi proved popular enough to carry over into the games, though whether this was due more to fans liking him or the developers, I can't say. And no commenter from the first review, he wasn't made for the games and included to promote them, or his episode would have tied into the plot of Mythologies and centered on Sub-Zero rather than Nightwolf. You idiot. When he appeared in MK4 and its tie-in spin-off Mortal Kombat Mythologies Sub-Zero, Quan Chi's story was completely rewritten so that, rather than a free-roaming sorcerer, he was now Shinnok's right-hand man. Now here's the thing, Quan Chi was a sorcerer that served as the villain's primary enforcer while secretly plotting to overthrow him. He threw flaming skulls as his main special attack and had the ability to imitate other characters' abilities in some way. Quan Chi was just the Shang Tsung to Shinnok's Shao Kahn. They could have very easily put Shang Tsung in MK4 instead, and the only difference would be that his grudge would be with Liu Kang rather than Sub-Zero, which never made any sense anyway because it's not the same Sub-Zero that made him explode in Mythologies. And MK 2011 makes it even worse because he knows it's not the same Sub-Zero, he turned that Sub-Zero into Noob Saibot. Following this, the two sorcerers actually met in MK Deadly Alliance, where they formed an alliance that was effective enough to eliminate both Liu Kang and Shao Kahn. As I've mentioned before, this was an effective way of shaking up the status quo by removing both the main hero and main villain to show that these two meant business. It's a shame the two were never this effective again, even losing to Kung Lao in this game. Quan Chi also went through a notable redesign where he branded markings from the Dragon King's tomb into his flesh for later use. Remember this detail because the people making the bloody games didn't. It's also strange that Quan Chi requires Shang Tsung's help to resurrect the Dragon King's army while Quan Chi is now described primarily as a necromancer. Weird. He's presumed dead at the start of Deception and later revealed to be alive in Armageddon, where he's the one to propose the alliance with the other main villains, and his survival is never actually explained. His Deadly Alliance design carried over into these two games, but Deception picks up right after Deadly Alliance and Armageddon just reuses models from those two games anyway, so I can give them a pass. His cameo in MK Shaolin Monks, however, cannot be excused. Since the game is a retelling of MK2, it makes perfect sense for Quan Chi to not only make an appearance, but also have the markings he shouldn't have for another 3 games. I don't know if they were just reusing a CG model for the scene, but it's not the worst offender. MK vs DCU is where his presence became truly obnoxious. The game is set right after MK3, which is why his presence here in the Deadly Alliance outfit with the markings makes total sense. There does exist a piece of concept art for a new design for him for DCU, but they never used it despite having to make a new model for him anyway. But the design was really good and it clearly inspired his look in MKX. The plot takes a few cues from the second movie for whatever stupid reason, with Shao Kahn and Shinnok in an alliance and Quan Chi sent as an envoy. Quan Chi is revealed to be the one who revived Scorpion as his enforcer, and then displays his new mind control gimmick on Kitana. Side note, Armageddon is the only game made since 2002 in which Kitana is not under any form of mind control. Anyway, he's a major NPC like Shazam in the Guardians of the Universe, he's the one who brings the MK side together to battle the DC side, and he was planned to be DLC alongside Kung Lao, Harley Quinn, and Doomsday. Yeah, because he's totally deserving of being compared to characters as important as those, but the game's non-canon, so his presence and role in Scorpion's story didn't bother me that much at the time. But then MK 2011 ruined everything. All of a sudden, Quan Chi actually is present in MK 1-3. He is the one who revived Scorpion and turned Sub-Zero into Noob. He suggests the entire plot with Sindel in MK3 and personally resurrects her. She even knows who he is. He sets up the iconic Solnado of MK3. He wears Shinnok's amulet openly without anyone who would recognise it doing so. And he's played up as the master manipulator who pulls everyone's strings like he's Revolver fucking Ocelot. But he's not. Quan Chi is just another cheap clone character from MK4, a literally pale imitation of Shang Tsung in both ability and motive, and he's being constantly rammed down our throats like he's pasty white cock in the mouth of the developers who are so fucking pleased with themselves for creating such a unique and interesting character and forcing him into every fucking Mortal Kombat story no matter how little he fits, and forgetting that the tattoos are only supposed to be added in the 5th game and refusing to give him a new change of clothes since 2002. I mean, at least they didn't have him kill Scorpion while posing as Sub-Zero like that god-awful MK Legacy did, but I bet they would have if they'd thought of it first. Quan Chi was just a guy who hired both Scorpion and Sub-Zero for the same job in mythologies. He figured they'd fight to the death, but sending two increased their chance of success, so it made sense and wasn't too intrusive. He merely created the context for their inevitable battle, but now he's the one who resurrected Scorpion and Sub-Zero as his minions, and the entire rivalry between the two revolves around him now. What, you don't believe me? Then consider this. After his loss in MK1, Scorpion's next appearance is for his fight with Sub-Zero in Chapter 8. After that, his next appearance is at the start of Chapter 16. When I said I'd forgotten he was even in the game by that point, I was dead serious. Scorpion, the most popular character in the series and Ed Boon's personal favourite, is absent for half the fucking game. And I figured out why. See, Scorpion kills Sub-Zero in MK1. Sub-Zero, as Noob, is then Quan Chi's primary enforcer, as seen when he accompanies his master in both the resurrection of Sindel and the creation of the Solnado. These two scenes both take place between chapters 8 and 16, which indicates that Quan Chi only uses Scorpion to get Sub-Zero under his control, and then leaves him to sit in the Netherrealm with his thumb up his arse until Noob dies, and Quan Chi's only option is to promote Scorpion again. Not only is he Quan Chi's bitch, he's Quan Chi's backup bitch, for when his real bitch gets killed. Way to completely reduce one of your best characters into a pathetic little stooge, guys. Tying Scorpion down the way they did completely destroys his original character arc. Originally, Scorpion was killed by the Elder Sub-Zero and came back from the dead for revenge, we all know this part. In order to do so, he had to pay the price of his memories of his family. After killing Sub-Zero, Scorpion learned that Sub-Zero had returned for MK2. Concluding that Sub-Zero was now also a lost soul bent on revenge, Scorpion headed to Outworld and witnessed Sub-Zero spurring an opponent. Through this, he realised that this was not the same Sub-Zero, but rather his younger brother. Feeling genuinely guilty for taking Kuai Liang's brother from him and attempting to punish Kuai Liang for his brother's crimes, Scorpion vowed to become his protector and even switched sides during Kahn's invasion after learning that Sub-Zero was fighting against Kahn. He only really worked with the villains again when Quan Chi tricked him into thinking Sub-Zero killed his family. After learning it was actually Quan Chi who was responsible, Scorpion hounded the sorcerer for presumably a few years before Quan Chi teamed up with Shang Tsung. Scorpion encountered Moloch and Dramin and was thrown into Shang Tsung's Solnado, becoming trapped in the void where he, alongside the Elder Gods, witnessed Raiden's death and Onaga's return. The Elder Gods then offered to grant Scorpion any wish if he became their champion and hunted down Onaga. He agreed, and while he didn't kill Onaga, the Elder Gods still revived his clan as promised. Whether because they are idiots or just complete dicks, we may never know, but they revived Scorpion's clan as undead, which pissed Scorpion off so much he tried to stop Armageddon from being prevented in order to end all of existence out of vindictive spite. And then the second timeline just has him as Quan Chi's pawn and working for the villains for the duration of the game. So they completely erase this brilliant character arc about a man who feels fully justified in seeking revenge, but also feels guilt over the ramifications of his vengeance. Which was a brilliant twist on the rivalry and just out of nowhere changes alignment from neutral to evil, just because. I so wish his ending where he burns Quan Chi's cock off was canon. Another arc they ruined was Sindel's. In the original backstory, Sindel was forced to marry Shao Kahn after he conquered her realm and murdered her husband. She killed herself to escape Kahn's rule, leaving her daughter and her people to suffer beneath Kahn's iron fist. Sindel's actions, while completely understandable, were ultimately selfish, and she suffered for it. Shao Kahn kept her soul from escaping and kept hold of it until the invasion plan thousands of years later. He had Shang Tsung revive her under mind control as Kahn's queen in Earthrealm, thereby allowing the Emperor to legally travel to Earthrealm to reclaim his bride. She was eventually freed from Kahn's control thanks to the daughter she abandoned, and her realm was restored. For her return in Deception, the roles were reversed. It was the daughter revived under mind control, and the mother seeking to free her. Although it was Liu Kang and Ermac that ultimately freed Kitana, Sindel's quest to save her daughter can be seen as a quest of redemption. Sindel's opportunity to make up for abandoning her daughter to Shao Kahn, and to repay her for the love she regardlessly displayed during the invasion of Earthrealm. Then the reboot doesn't give Sindel her chance at redemption, and she goes from one mind-controlled state to another without the first being properly established, making it unclear for new players that she isn't actually evil. And her suicide is portrayed as this grand heroic sacrifice to stop Kahn from claiming Earthrealm somehow, and Quan Chi claims it's a protection even the Elder Gods cannot grant. MK Legacy did a similar thing of making a bigger deal of Sindel's death, rather than letting it stand as an act of selfishness she's later absolved of through her own actions. Have you ever wondered why Star Wars fans get so bent out of shape over the whole Greedo shot first thing? It's not just because the logic is obscene and the effects laughable, it's because it robs Han of his character arc. Han Solo is a selfish rogue who won't hesitate to literally shoot a man under the table in order to survive and doesn't care about the plight of the rebellion unless he gets paid. His return to assist Luke in the Death Star battle is a sign that Han is changing, that he is starting to care about others and views Luke and Leia as friends he will stick his neck out for. By the time the trilogy ends, Han is fully on board with the rebellion and takes active part in a dangerous ground operation that won't be remembered the way the larger battle up in space will. He does it not for glory or money, but because he believes in the cause of his friends. By having Han shoot only in retaliation, Lucas severely weakened Han's arc, and likewise, by having Sindel's death be some grand act of heroism, MK writers are severely weakening Sindel's arc. She is now simply a plot device to help facilitate an awful plot twist, and a tool to be used to raise the stakes, nothing more. Ermac had a similar arc where, after being freed from Shao Kahn's control by Kenshi, he taught Kenshi to use telekinesis and sought redemption, finding an opportunity upon encountering the spirit of Liu Kang during Deception. He assisted Liu Kang in freeing Earth's heroes from mind control before joining the Forces of Light in Armageddon, but now that seems unlikely. Perhaps the most egregious example of a ruined story is the horrendous treatment of Shang Tsung, who I didn't realise how much I liked until he was gone. Shang Tsung is just constantly being shit on in this game. If he's not being punished for things that aren't his fault, he's jobbing to smoke, borrowing fatalities from other people, getting unceremoniously killed off, and having things he was responsible for the first time around being given to Quan Chi. MK3 made it clear that Shang Tsung played a key role, but now we can't have Shang Tsung do anything right, can we? No, let's give everything he does right to his knockoff. But then again, Shang Tsung is the one who makes the deal with Kano to get the weapons brought to Outworld for use in the invasion, before anyone even considers invasion. But without that, Kahn's guys would get massacred. Imagine an army of strikers versus an army of barakas. Yeah, that's what I thought. Why does the original villain have to be treated so badly just to push a guy who is basically the same person but worse in every way? I mean, he was treated with much more respect in the Armageddon intro, where he was basically the star for the last stretch as he blasted and threw and punched everyone who came at him off the pyramid, even outwitting Kahn and throwing Quan Chi off the pyramid. Hey, let's see that again. Put that on loop. Yeah, suck it, you pasty white bastard. But it's not like these are the only characters ruined by this terrible, terrible story. Let's talk about Shao Kahn. One detail that completely passed me by the first time around was how Shao Kahn is so... let's not mince words here. He's fucking retarded. The decisions he makes in the game are so obviously bad, you have to wonder how he ever kept his empire together this long, or how he even got it started in the first place. I'd like to cover two particular examples of his extreme stupidity, but know that these aren't the only bad decisions he makes, merely the two that stand out the most. The first is when Kitana reports Shang Tsung for creating Mileena. Remember, as far as Kitana is concerned, Shao Kahn is her somewhat loving father, and is completely unaware of any of this. Kahn's reaction?
Well done, sorcerer.
Like, are you for real, bro? What kind of a fucking idiot would react this way? Not only does he make it clear Mileena was made on his orders, or at least with his express permission, he also then goes on a tirade about how he isn't Kitana's real father, and how he personally killed him. So of course she turns against him and her best friend Jade goes with her. What the hell did he expect was going to happen? And then, just to compound on this stupidity, he has her sent to the tower, for later transfer to the arena for execution, guarded by a person who was already proven to be a failure in such a role when she had backup. Other than to pad out Kung Lao's chapter with a wild goose chase, Kahn has no reason to do any of this. Dude, just kill her. Kill her right now, cave her skull in with your sledgehammer, then have Mileena pose as her. It avoids the pointless transportation, allowing you to keep more competitors around for the tournament, and keeps those who might be loyal to Kitana on your side. I mean, if the reason to have Mileena look identical to Kitana wasn't to replace her as it definitively was in the original timeline, then what was the point? If you want people to know Kitana's dead, just take her directly to the arena when you yourself head there right after this. And not only that, he makes absolutely no attempt to stop her from being freed later, so what the hell was he trying to achieve with any of this? Just to show how easy it will be to achieve a better outcome, let's do a little roleplay. Imagine, if you will, that I am the big bad Emperor of Outworld. Granted, I'm closer to this Emperor than this one, but let's just pretend. So Kitana brings Shang Tsung before me to report his experiments. I remind you, as far as she is aware, I am her loving father who has no knowledge of any of this. Kahn's reaction is...
Well done, sorcerer.
While my reaction is... What? Is this true? Guards, bring me Jade to comfort my daughter and Quan Chi for the summary execution of Shang Tsung. Once the two are brought in, I turn to Quan Chi and I say to him, Quan Chi, my daughter has been through a rather traumatic experience. Can you do something to help her with that? Now this is Quan Chi's signal to use his magic to put Kitana and Jade into a compliant trance state, wherein they are both completely open to suggestion. That done, I turn to Shang Tsung and I say, well done, sorcerer. Take some guards and return to your lab, move everything to a new location, leave nothing behind, and I look forward to meeting my new daughter. Once Shang Tsung has left, I turn to Kitana and question her on why she went to the lab. Through this, I learn that Raiden knows more than he should. Admittedly, I doubt I would figure out he's having visions from the future, but it does tell me to keep an eye on Raiden and be on the lookout for spies in my ranks. I then use Kitana and Jade's current state to rewrite their memories. I tell them that Mileena is Kitana's younger twin sister, who has been sickly for many years after being cursed by an Earthrealm warrior, but she is now recovered and ready to resume serving me alongside her sister and Jade. As a result, Kitana and Jade accept Mileena's presence, Kitana develops an intense animosity towards Earthrealm for what they did to her sister, and I keep both her and Jade loyal to me. You see how easy that is? But let's try another scene. Let's try the final rounds of the tournament. By the time Liu Kang and Kung Lao return, Smoke has already lost and Johnny Cage is in the process of jobbing to Ermac. Sonya, Jack, Sub-Zero and the Cyborgs have all left Outworld, thereby presumably disqualifying themselves. The only warriors left to oppose Outworld at this juncture are the two monks and Raiden, who can't compete unless directly challenged, and he obviously will not be. Kung Lao beats the Deadly Alliance and Kintaro before Kahn outright murders him. Liu Kang then attacks Kahn and we all know how it goes from there. Put me in Kahn's place and I stick to my established characterization as a patient man by throwing my remaining warriors at Kung Lao until he's worn down and killed. Remember, my remaining tournament warriors are Goro, Noob Saibot, Mileena, Shiva, Kano, Motaro, and thanks to the previous scene, Kitana and Jade. It's highly doubtful both Earthrealm warriors would survive against all of those, but if either of them gets through, they still have to get through me. I trust in my own abilities and those of my followers, and I don't cheat. But what if I did? Imagine for a minute that I do murder Kung Lao. Liu Kang is enraged and attacks. I simply say, touch me, and Earthrealm forfeits. It's that simple. It's my tournament, my rules. If Liu Kang touches me before he beats all of my remaining warriors, Earth loses. Do you see how easy it would be to achieve a much better result than what Kahn does through his stupidity? All that aside though, I still have two other major gripes with Kahn in the game. First is the sudden murder of Kung Lao. Sure, it works effectively as a twist if you don't think about it at all, but looking back, not only does this not work as a logical outcome for Raiden's actions because Kahn never broke Liu Kang's neck, but the whole thing strikes me as quite out of character for Kahn. Yes, Kahn is the merciless Emperor of Outworld, but he is also characterised as a patient man. He schemes, he waits. He slowly poisoned Onaga to become the Emperor to begin with. He's waited 2 consecutive 9-win streaks totaling 950 years. He then makes a challenge against Raiden which isn't against any rules, setting up his own tournament with raised stakes. It's only after this fails that he invades, and in the original timeline, that invasion was legal because of the Sindel loophole. So you see, Kahn has always been very patient with his schemes, so cheating like this shows a great amount of insecurity on Kahn's part and doesn't fit with his established character. The last major problem I have with Shao Kahn in this game is that he is a petulant fucking child who blames everybody else for his failures. He's like Kratos. For example, he blames Shang Tsung for losing MK1, true to the original timeline, but Kahn should have taken greater measures to assure Outworld's victory. Hell, Shiva, Kano, Kitana and Jade don't even compete in the tournament despite being present on the island, and Kahn has other warriors that could take part as well. Kahn just left it all up to Shang Tsung without even restoring him to his physical prime when it was well within his capacity to do so. Second, the MK2 plot failed. Shang Tsung's fault? Kahn went along with the idea, broke the rules and still lost a fight himself. Again, it's Kahn's fault as much as Shang Tsung's. He probably blames Shang Tsung for the stuff with the katana as well, which, as I've already illustrated, was entirely Kahn's fault. You can't even argue that Shang Tsung should have set up better security, because any guards he could employ surely serve Shao Kahn above all else, and would therefore need the Emperor's express permission to do so. The only thing stopping Katana from going down there in the first place is Kahn forbidding her from doing so. No guards or traps in place, and he doesn't even attempt to learn why she disobeyed. And finally, the straw that broke the Centaur's back, probably literally, the death of Motaro. Does no one else find this weird that the final straw, the catalyst for the entire ending of the game, was the death of Motaro, who never did or even said anything? Why is he so damn important all of a sudden, and why does Kahn kill Shang Tsung now? It really does seem like this totally random event is being blamed on Shang Tsung, who hasn't actually failed at something that Kahn wasn't also to blame for, other than losing to Liu Kang and Kung Lao. And I remind you, Kahn himself lost not long after one of those fights. You know, for a game that glorifies the classic villain by making him the be-all, end-all ultimate threat, even above the collapse of all reality, they certainly do a piss-poor job of making him seem threatening.
It's official. I suck.
When I decided to redo this review, I was determined to give the game a second chance. After all, I didn't enjoy the Fellowship of the Ring until my second viewing, so I do know the value of giving things a second chance. I figured I may have been a little too harsh on the game last time, and maybe, going in with full knowledge of what happened and with almost 5 years to reflect, I might actually be able to enjoy the game better this time. Even if the gameplay wasn't a major step down from the PS2 entries, the overwhelmingly poor quality of the story would have completely ruined the experience. Even leaving out the horrendous lack of consistency with the previous games, the story is rife with poorly thought out plot points, completely illogical character actions, and centres on a contrived mystery that no rational human being would ever cause for how unnatural and vague such a statement would be to hinge a grand world-altering scheme on. It is offensive, and it is a massive waste of potential. The whole alternate timeline thing was a great opportunity to shake things up, but the developers had things stick too closely to the original timeline, even if the context is altered or there was a great excuse to change things. Cabal didn't need to get burned this time around, but he does, and clearly at the hands of someone different. And likewise, Sub-Zero didn't have to become noob either. The developers even stated before the game came out that the Sub-Zero featured in the game was the original, not the younger, implying that he wouldn't die and could maybe team up with Smoke to save his brother in a kind of inverted parallel to the original timeline. And the fact that they used the primary Sub-Zero costume in Quan Chi's false vision seems to support the idea that this was indeed the case, but they changed their minds during development. Well, either that or nobody was paying attention. When I released the original review back in 2012, in addition to the nothing argument of, I assume you can't do better and therefore your critique is invalid, one of the most common responses I received was, why do you expect a good story in a fighting game, or the story doesn't matter in fighting games, or even, the series is unrealistic and therefore doesn't need to be logical. Listen, you ignorant buffoons, no matter the medium, no matter the genre, story is a key component. Yes, in some instances the story isn't as important as gameplay or spectacle, but story contextualizes everything else. If story didn't matter, why would the reboot have been based around a canonical event rather than simply jumping ship to a new universe? Why would they have put in those little Easter eggs like the Tundra bit? Why would they have created an entire 16-chapter story mode with fully voiced and mocap cutscenes with some of the best voice talent in the business? I'll tell you why. It's because story does matter. Even though I believe the writers fucked up at almost every turn, I do at least give them credit for trying to not only tell a compelling story, but to include the full cast with some character development and good character moments, unlike the bare bones output of Namco or Capcom, and make sure it's simple to follow, unlike the inane drivel Arc System Works comes out with. Story matters, whether it be in Metal Gear or Call of Duty, The Walking Dead or Halo, Final Fantasy or Mortal Kombat. Don't just accept bad stories and say, well, what did you expect? With a 20-year-long franchise, I expect a hell of a lot better than this, and I am not being unreasonable to expect that much. There was a time when MK was my favourite thing in the world. I loved the characters, the story, the gameplay, the creativity, but after this complete train wreck of a game that I have fully experienced twice now, I can definitively say that not only is Mortal Kombat 2011 a bad game, but it is offensive to me as a long-time fan. It completely wiped out the previous entries, making all the time and money I spent on the series, learning all the stories and motivations of the cast, a complete waste of time. Those versions of the characters will never come back. They've been replaced by newer, vastly inferior versions, and for what? To make things simple for the fucking plebs that don't know how to use Wikipedia? This is a DC reboot in all but name, and I truly sympathise with those that have to endure that shit on a regular basis. There was so much great storytelling in the past, quests for revenge and redemption, multiple allegiances, manipulation and subterfuge, a vast universe and a colourful and interesting cast of over 60 characters. But now everything is horribly grim, the characters have considerably less dimension to their stories, and the plot is simplified to just 2 or 3 factions. The Mortal Kombat I fell in love with is gone forever, and left in its place is a definitively inferior version with no depth or joy to be found. That, my friends, that is why I hate Mortal Kombat 2011.